Hey there, tonight we're not walking in the footsteps of lords or knights. We're moving quietly through the shadows with the servants who made the castle run while rarely being seen. The scullery maid scrubbing before dawn, the spit boy turning meat until his arms go numb, the laundress with frozen hands, the guard pacing in silence while everyone else sleeps. This is their story, not one of glory or grandeur, but of relentless work, aching limbs, and quiet strength. 10 lives, 10 days, all under one roof, but in entirely different worlds. If this kind of soft, grounded history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these quiet stories travel. So take a deep breath, let the fire crackle, dim the lights, and let's begin, not with royalty, but with those who serve beneath them. Good morning. You're awake, not because you've had enough sleep, don't be ridiculous, but because the stone floor you were using as a mattress has successfully leached the last bit of warmth from your body. Also, the cook stepped on you twice. That's just how your day begins when you're the lowest-ranking life form in a medieval castle. Welcome to the thrilling career of a scullery maid. You are unpaid, unwashed, and largely unnoticed, unless someone needs something cleaned or someone else to blame. You sleep beside the hearth because it's the only warm place in the kitchen, and by warm, we mean marginally less cold than outside. Your bedding is a burlap sack filled with straw that has seen better decades. It smells like burnt fat, wet wood, and crushed ambition. Your shift, that's your one piece of clothing, is made of coarse, undyed wool that doubles as both pajamas and uniform. It's been boiled maybe twice this year, probably once, possibly never. You rise before the sun, before the roosters, before God, it seems. Why? Because everything that needs to happen before the nobles wake, fire, water, bread, cleaning, is your responsibility. Technically not yours alone, but let's be honest, the other girls know how to hide when work is handed out. You haven't learned that trick yet, or maybe you just weren't born slippery enough. The hearth is dead. The embers have gone cold overnight. That's bad. A scullery without fire is like a knight without armor. Still dangerous, but mostly just pathetic. You shuffle outside into the pitch-black courtyard, barefoot, because your shoes disintegrated last spring and were repurposed as door insulation. The flagstones are wet and jagged. You gather kindling with hands too numb to feel splinters. Back inside, you crouch by the hearth and begin coaxing flame from damp wood and angry thoughts. Eventually, the fire crackles to life, and you hold your fingers above it until they stop resembling corpse fingers. You're now ready for your next task, water. The castle does not have plumbing. It has you. You haul wooden buckets from the well, gallons and gallons of water, heavy and sloshing, balanced on a yoke across your narrow shoulders. It takes multiple trips. Your arms burn, your back screams, your knees wobble like boiled barley, and you haven't even reached breakfast yet. By the time the kitchen staff starts filtering in, yawning, stretching, scratching, you're on your 4th trip to the well. No one thanks you. No one even makes eye contact. You are furniture with legs, that's all. The cook bursts in like a thunderclap, in a bad mood, sweating already, barking orders, and armed with a wooden spoon that's been repurposed as a disciplinary device. She shouts something about the stew pot still being crusty. That's your cue to start scrubbing again. You scrub pots until your knuckles bleed. No soap, of course, that's for rich people and sinners. You use ashes, sand, and lye if someone remembers to make it. The lye burns, so does the ash in its own gritty way. You've developed something between a callus and a chemical burn on your right hand. The left one's worse. The scullery is a room of punishment disguised as a workspace. There's no ventilation. The one window is permanently clogged with soot. Everything smells like meat that's been boiled too long, and something else you don't want to identify. You spend most of your day hunched over basins, scraping grease from pewter trenchers and slapping rats off the table with a ladle. Let's talk about rats. They run this place. You just work here. Mid-morning arrives. You haven't eaten. There's a heel of bread in your apron, hidden and dry as chalk. You gnaw on it behind the doorway, trying not to look guilty. You fail. A kitchen maid spots you, reports you. and now you're assigned to latrine pot duty for the rest of the week. Congratulations. Later, you get promoted to onion duty, which is just a fancy way of saying cry professionally for 2 hours. You chop onions until your face is a waterfall. No one asks if you're okay. Everyone assumes you're just weeping from your station in life. Around noon, the nobles take their first meal of the day. You carry in dishes, step precisely where you've been told, and do not make eye contact under any circumstances. Nobles don't like to be reminded that servants have eyes or faces or thoughts. You hold a pitcher for a full hour and are never asked to pour. Your arms go numb, that's normal. After the meal, you clean again, the same trenchers, now slick with gravy, bones tossed carelessly under the table, half-eaten pies, chewed grapes, and something that may have once been a fish. You scrape it all into the slop bucket. You're not allowed to keep scraps, but you might sneak one, just once, just the crust, just the edge, just enough to keep standing. Afternoon blurs into evening. You haul more water, peel more roots, mop the floor, sweep the hall. You get blamed for the dog vomiting in the solar, even though you've never even seen the solar. Doesn't matter, you were there spiritually. As the sun sets, dinner prep begins. It's louder now, hotter, the hearth blazing, smoke filling the rafters. Someone drops a pot, the cook screams, a fire nearly starts. You slap it out with your apron and keep moving. You're allowed to eat again, this time from a shared bowl passed between 5 girls. The stew is mostly liquid, a floating root, a grain of barley, and a suspicious chunk that might be squirrel. Doesn't matter, you eat it. It's food. Finally, dinner is served to the nobles. You stand nearby, again a background character in someone else's pageant. Your feet are soaked, your back is locked, you haven't spoken in hours except to say, "Yes, cook," "Sorry, cook," or "It won't happen again, cook," whether or not you know what happened. Night falls, dishes again, more scrubbing, bones stuck to the pan like medieval cement. Your hands are shaking now, not from cold, from exhaustion. You're dismissed with a grunt. You crawl back to your sack near the hearth. The fire has dimmed to glowing embers. You press close to the stone for warmth. Your tunic is still damp. You smell like smoke, onions, and fatigue. Someone's already asleep beside you. Someone else is crying quietly. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. You lie there for a moment, not asleep, not quite awake, thinking about what came before this. You didn't choose this life. No one chooses to be a scullery maid. You were born into it. Your mother worked in the dairy until her back gave out. Your aunt did laundry until she caught fever from the river. Now it's your turn. You're part of the great medieval inheritance. Suffering passed down like a ladle. There's no path up. You don't become a cook. You don't marry the steward. You don't get promoted to lady's maid and learn embroidery under soft candlelight. That's fiction. You grow older. Your hands get worse. Eventually you're too slow to scrub the pots, and they replace you with someone younger, cheaper, and less likely to fall asleep standing up. So you pay attention to the little things, the rhythm of the kitchen, the shifting alliances between servants, the unspoken rules of survival. Never correct the cook. Always share the driest part of the bread with the girl who's bleeding. Stay out of the steward's way. If you hear a noble's footsteps behind you, move immediately or risk being trampled, physically or socially. There's gossip, of course, the only currency the servants have. Someone swears the chamberlain is sleeping with the lady-in-waiting. Someone else says he's in love with the choir boy. Someone saw the knight with the red beard eat 5 figs and throw up into his own helmet. That one is probably true. When there's a wedding or a feast, it's chaos. 3 times the guests, 10 times the work, and no time for anything but frantic scrubbing and silent praying. The nobles celebrate, you blister. By the end of those nights, you're not even tired. You're hollow. And then there's winter, the worst of it. You work through your own cough, your own fever. You wear the same shift for weeks, layered with scraps. There are days when the water in your bucket freezes before you can get back to the kitchen. You keep going anyway, because if you stop, someone else takes your spot, and because you've been told that suffering without complaint is a virtue, especially for girls like you. You used to have a name. People used to say it. Now you're just girl, or you there. You're not special, you're not a hero, you're just another invisible cog in the castle machine. And yet, the castle runs because of you. Because you get up before the sun. Because you know how to quiet a squeaky hinge with goose grease. Because you remember which bucket is clean and which one holds the mop water. Because you scrub the pans until they shine like coins you'll never hold. No statue will ever be carved for you, no song sung. But if you disappeared tomorrow, the kitchen would fall apart in a week. You don't sleep well, you twitch, you ache. Your dreams are strange and half-formed, sometimes of green fields, sometimes of boats sailing away, sometimes of nothing at all. You wake with your mouth dry and your arms heavy. Another day begins, another day exactly like the last, and no one notices except maybe Lord Crumbs. You are the spit boy. Congratulations or condolences. It really depends on how much you enjoy rotating slowly in front of open flame while contemplating your life choices. You're somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, small enough to crouch under the hearth, old enough to not cry every time you burn yourself. You were either orphaned, sold, or your parents were very persuasive when it came to convincing you this was an opportunity. Your job is to sit on a stool, if you're lucky enough to have one, beside the great kitchen hearth and turn the spit all day, slowly, clockwise, mostly, until someone tells you otherwise. Sometimes you're told to stop, sometimes you're told you're turning too fast or too slow, or that you weren't turning it with enough noble dignity. Once someone accused you of cheekiness because you blink too often. It's hot, hot in a way that feels unnatural, like living inside a loaf of bread that's halfway through baking. Your cheeks are constantly flushed. Your hair is always damp. Your tunic singed at the hem smells like every type of meat that's ever passed through this kitchen. You used to like the smell of roasting duck. Now it gives you migraines. Burns are constant, blisters everywhere. The kitchen has no sympathy. You're just expected to get better at dodging. If you blister your palm, wrap it in a rag. If your eyebrows singe off, grow new ones. If you faint, try to land somewhere that won't spill anything. You don't get breaks. The meat doesn't care if your arms are tired. The fire doesn't care if you're sweating so hard it's dripping into your eyes. The nobles expect their roast goose to spin at the correct angle and pace, or heads will metaphorically roll, sometimes literally, depending on how drunk the steward is. On special feast days, the spit gets longer, bigger birds, whole pigs, once an entire deer. It took two of you to turn it. Your partner had a lazy eye and a mean streak. He let go of the crank at random intervals just to watch you panic. You haven't seen him in a while. Rumor has it he's been reassigned to the kennels. You hope the dogs are treating him fairly. You sit for hours in the same position. Your knees go numb, your back knots up. One time your foot fell asleep, so hard you thought you'd gone lame. The steward called you dramatic and threw a turnip at your head. The kitchen is chaos, shouting, boiling, clanging, people running into each other with trays of oysters and jugs of wine. You are the eye of the storm. Nobody thanks you, nobody remembers you, but if that roast comes out uneven, someone will blame the boy who turned it. When the meat is finally declared done, you help pull it off the spit, carefully. The fat sizzles, the grease drips. If you flinch, you get scolded. If you hesitate, you get slapped. Then it's on to the next roast, or the stew, or the pies, or the boiling cauldron that smells like fermented onions and despair. You don't really know what time is, ever. Your entire life is firelight and hunger. Sometimes, if you're lucky, someone throws you a bone, literally, not a metaphor, a half-gnawed bone with just enough meat on it to pretend you had lunch. You eat it in the corner with your hands, hunched like a little animal, and then go back to turning. By late afternoon, the fire has turned your cheeks red and your lips dry and cracked. Your hands are black with soot. You've inhaled so much smoke that you cough like someone 4 times your age. You're still rotating. You hear the sound of plates clattering and nobles laughing in the hall above. You'll never go there. You're not allowed. That room is clean and bright and full of soft chairs and white bread. You exist so they don't have to. Eventually, the feasting ends. That doesn't mean you're done. It means you now get to help carry trays of half-eaten meat back down to the kitchen. You don't get to eat it. You carry it. You scrape bones into a slop bucket, rinse goblets, and drag the roasting spit into the scullery for cleaning. It's heavy. Your shoulder aches. You pretend you don't feel the blister bursting under your palm. Someone shouts that the Lord wants a roast prepared for his hounds. You start the process all over again. The dogs will eat better than you tonight, again. It's late now. Your tunic is stuck to your skin. Your hair is stiff with grease. Your hands are shaking. And not just from fatigue, from hunger too. You finally get a bowl of pottage. It's thin, just boiled grain and a few soft turnips. You slurp it down in the corner. You don't talk to anyone. There's nothing to say. Everyone's too tired to pretend they're people. You clean the tools, dull knives, the spit, the hooks. Everything must be spotless before the steward rounds. If he finds a smear of fat, you're scrubbing it with your own spit if you're lucky. If not, you're on floor duty in the Lord's privy the next day. Night settles like smoke. The kitchen quiets. The last pots clatter into place. The cook finally stops yelling. You sit near the dying fire, too sore to lie down, too wired to sleep. A rat crawls past. You don't flinch. You're too tired to care. You think about your old life, before the castle. You were a shepherd's son, maybe, or your parents ran a mill. Maybe they still do, maybe they forgot you. Or maybe they were just desperate. One less mouth to feed. There's no path out of this. The best you can hope for is that your burns heal properly, and that your back doesn't twist too early. If you're lucky, maybe you'll graduate to assistant cook by age 20, if you survive that long. Winter is especially cruel. The castle walls are thick, but the draft still cuts through like a blade. Your station by the hearth should be a blessing. Warmth, light fire. But it's not warmth, it's exposure. One side of your body roasts, while the other side freezes. You rotate like the meat, a human kebab of fatigue and frostbite. You don't have proper shoes. You wrap your feet in scraps and try not to stand in puddles when you walk. Your knees pop like old door hinges when you crouch. You wonder if you'll ever uncrouch. There are days your fingers are so stiff from cold and burns you can't tell if you're holding the spit or it's holding you. And your health, you don't have that. Your cough has become part of your personality. Your skin peels from heat rash, then cracks from cold air. You smell constantly of scorched fat, which sounds delicious but makes people avoid you. You've burned the same forearm so many times it looks like overcooked pork. No one offers a remedy. The apothecary is for nobles. You're told to rub it with pig lard and keep turning. The hierarchy in the kitchen is strict. You are beneath the kitchen maids, beneath the butcher's assistant, beneath the boy who fetches eggs. You are the lowest. Even the dog that begs for bones is higher than you. At least it gets scraps sometimes. The steward nods at you. That's the highlight of your week. You wonder, not often, but sometimes, what your life might look like if you ever left. Then you remember, spit boys don't leave. They either grow up to be other kinds of servants, or they don't grow up at all. You settle into your spot by the hearth again, legs folded, arms hugging your knees. The flames are lower now, but your skin still burns where yesterday's blisters cracked open. You stare into the coals and imagine what it might feel like to be warm without hurting. You don't know, you've never felt that. Outside, snow is falling. Inside, meat is sizzling. And in between them, forgotten and ignored, you keep turning, like you always do. You know how every castle or town needs someone to deal with the human waste. That's you. You're a gong farmer, which is a polite medieval way of saying professional human filth remover. If it goes in the chamber pot, you take it out. If it ends up in the latrine, you get it back out again. You are the bottom of the bottom, scraping the literal cesspit of society. And somehow, it's a real job. One that paid better than some others. But before you get excited, remember it paid better, because no one else wanted to do it. Your shift starts at night, not because you're nocturnal, but because no one wants to smell or see you during the day. You're banned from public markets until you've bathed, not that bathing helps. The stink doesn't wash off. It lives in your pores now. You're the reason people cross the street and pretend they didn't see you. Your tools, a rake, a bucket, and a shovel. Your uniform, layers of thick wool stuffed with moss, and whatever you can find to try and block the smell. It doesn't work. The smell finds a way. It always does. Your job is simple. Go to the cesspits, dig out the compacted, fermented, semi-liquid remains of everything the castle or town has flushed into the earth for the last 6 months. and get it out before it overflows into the streets. You climb down into the pit. Yes, down, ladder optional, rope if you're lucky. The smell hits you like a brick wall dipped in sewage and fermented despair. It burns your eyes, coats your tongue, and makes you wonder what choices in life led you here. You breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. Now you can taste it. You descend slowly, boots squelching on the moist slope of decomposing waste. The pit is ankle-deep in places, knee-deep in others, and bottomless in imagination. You rake through it all. The recent stuff is bad, but the older layers, that's where the nightmares live. Gray sludge, black crusts, slick masses that burble and shift as if they're thinking about becoming sentient. You don't ask questions, you dig. And what are you digging through? Human waste, of course, animal waste, broken chamber pots, straw soaked with fluids you'll never identify, bits of food, bits of cloth, the occasional dead rat, the occasional dead other thing. Once you've found a chicken, you still don't know how it got down there. You buried it with some dignity. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you find coins dropped from nobles who used the latrine in a hurry. You pocket them. You've earned it. Once your bucket is full, you haul it out. You dump it into your cart, an open wooden box on wheels that creaks like it resents you. You repeat this process a dozen times, more if the castles had a feast recently. And you always do it at night, under torchlight, because the people above don't want to see the cost of their comfort. You work in silence. No one talks in a cesspit. Once your cart is full of what medieval records gently call night soil, you roll it through the quiet streets. The wheels leave tracks. The air behind you wilts. If anyone sees you, they gag or mutter a prayer. One kid once threw a cabbage at you. You threw something back. You're not proud of it. You head outside the town walls to the dumping grounds, usually near the fields, because, guess what? Waste gets reused. All that filth you collect becomes fertilizer. The very same nobles, who won't look you in the eye, are unknowingly eating vegetables grown in their own refuse. That's what you call medieval recycling. By early morning, you're done dumping, but not done working. You return to clean your tools, which means rinsing them in a pond that's already halfway ruined. You wash your boots, your clothes, your hands. It doesn't help. The stink clings. Your neighbors can always tell what shift you've worked. Some won't sit near you at meals. Some won't even share a table. You try not to let it get to you. You tell yourself it's honest work, important work. If you stop showing up, the entire castle would flood in filth within the week. You're not a hero, but you're what stands between society and ankle-deep disaster. You eat alone most days. Your bread tastes like ash, not because it's burned, just because everything smells like ash and worse now. You drink ale because the water's not safe, and because, frankly, being sober around your own job is a kind of masochism. Winter is the worst, not because it's cold, though it is, but because everything freezes. The waste freezes, your hands freeze, your breath turns to steam, and then to regret. You've got to hack through icy crusts with a shovel just to reach the warm, steaming horror beneath. It's the only time you'll ever see something warm and be upset about it. Summer isn't better. Summer bakes everything. The stench gets airborne, flies swarm. Wasps show up for reasons you don't understand. You sweat so much it soaks through your shoes. You've tried everything to mask the smell, vinegar, crushed herbs, even rubbing yourself with mint leaves. All it does is make the stench floral. People joke about you behind your back. Smells like a gong farmer is an insult. Some people assume you're stupid. You're not. You know how to brace a ladder with one leg while hauling 40 pounds of waste up a rope with the other. You know which side of the pit is safer to stand on after rain. You know which torch oils don't explode when dropped into methane pockets. That's science or something like it. And here's the kicker. You make more money than most servants. Yep, this is one of the few medieval jobs that actually paid well. Not luxuriously. You still live in a one-room hut on the edge of town, but better than a cook's helper or a baker's boy. Because no one else wants to do what you do, ever. They'd rather starve than crawl through what you crawl through. That's your leverage, your curse, your wage. By night's end, you're done. You drag your empty cart back to the yard, lean your shovel against the wall, and sit down on a log, not because it's clean, but because it's there. You sleep outside when the smell gets too bad. Your wife, if you have one, insists. Your kids say you smell like boiled cabbage and sin. You can't argue, they're right. You close your eyes, but the scent stays, it always stays. You smell it even in your dreams. Your hands don't look like hands anymore. The skin is always cracked, the fingernails black from grime, no matter how long you soak them. The calluses stay. You stop trying to scrub them clean. The soap costs more than your dignity used to. You used to be able to smell flowers, grass, firewood, not anymore. Your nose is broken, not physically, but spiritually. All you can ever smell now is rot. If a cart of apples rolled past you, you'd think they'd gone off. You've been rewired. Sometimes the castle guards joke with you. They say things like "don't fall in," and laugh like that's the first time you've heard it. You smile politely and pretend it's funny. Once, one of them shoved you near the edge of the pit for a laugh. You didn't smile that time. You have dreams rarely about becoming something else, a baker, maybe a scribe. But when you wake up, your hands still smell like last night, and so you rinse your face, adjust your sackcloth tunic, and walk back to the pit. Because even in dreams, someone has to carry the bucket. As the sky turns gray and the roosters begin their song, you haul your last bucket, scrape your last shoe, and exhale into the morning. The castle will wake soon, oblivious. The nobles will relieve themselves into gilded bowls, unaware of what happens after. And you'll vanish into shadow again, like the stink you carry. That's your job, that's your role, that's your day. The gong farmer, cleaner of kingdoms, forgotten by all, remembered only by the flies. You wear shoes. That alone makes you higher in rank than 3/4 of the castle staff. They're stiff leather, curled at the toe, and they squeak when you walk, which is unfortunate, because silence is part of your job. You're the apprentice to the chamberlain, which means you carry ledgers, memorize inventories, and pretend to understand what the words protocol and accountability really mean. You're not noble, of course, don't get any ideas. You're a servant, but you're a servant with access. You enter rooms others only clean. You witness things most peasants couldn't spell. You fetch parchment, write numbers, and maintain calm when the countess is screaming that her linens smell like goat. Your day begins before the lords rise. You wake in the servants' hall near the good fire, the one not used for cooking rats or heating piss buckets. You splash water on your face, comb your hair with your fingers, and brush your tunic clean with your own sleeve. Presentation matters. First task, candles. You walk along hallways, replacing stubs with fresh tallow tapers. Beeswax is for the chapel and the great hall only. Everyone else gets the cheap stuff that smells faintly of sheep. As you move from room to room, you note anything out of place. That's your second job, to notice. If the salt cellar is low, you write it down. If the wine stock is 2 casks short, you investigate. If the chamber pot in the guest room is full, you find someone else to deal with it. Say, you delegate downwards. It's tradition. The chamberlain is already awake, of course. He never sleeps, it seems. He's a narrow man with a sharp nose and sharper expectations. He smells faintly of ink and dried lavender. His robes are always spotless, and he always knows when you've made a mistake, sometimes before you make it. He speaks in lists. 2 bolts of woolen broadcloth for barrels of lamp oil. 1 visiting friar with dietary demands bordering on heresy. You nod, write it all down, and pray you don't spill ink again. Last time you did, he made you recopy an entire month's ledger by candlelight while the steward watched and chewed pickled herring directly into your ear. Your job is part clerk, part courier, part scapegoat. When the linens go missing, it's your fault. When the firewood is damp, it's your fault. When the Lord's hunting dog defecates in the guest stairwell, somehow, still your fault. Mid-morning is for inspections. You follow the chamberlain through halls and chambers like a silent, scribbling ghost. He taps walls, lifts bed covers, tastes wine, sniffs rushes. You nod and record. You try not to sigh. Once, you caught yourself yawning and spent the rest of the day organizing dry peas by size and color. You envy no one in this castle, except maybe the cook's dog, who at least gets to bark without consequence. Lunch is not a break, it's a logistical nightmare. Who eats what, when, and where, and who is seated 2 spots away from whom, so no one accidentally reignites a blood feud over pigeon pie. You carry seating charts, correct titles, and gentle reminders that Lady Cressida is no longer speaking to Lord Auric since the Lent wine incident. After the meal, the Chamberlain reviews accounts. You sit across from him in the solar, reading aloud each line item: wax, fish, salt, horseshoes, ink, wool, barley, mead, soap, barley again. The list never ends. Occasionally, he asks you for the weight of a cask or how many loaves can be cut from a stone of flour. If you hesitate, he raises one eyebrow. You'd rather be slapped. Then come the visitors, nobles from another estate, a wandering knight, some distant cousin who's somehow always between holdings. They arrive with trunks and egos and dietary needs. You show them to their chambers and take careful notes on what linens they receive, not because anyone will thank you, but because someone will absolutely blame you when they vanish. You're also responsible for the castle's keys, or more accurately, for fetching them. The armory key, the wine cellar key, the upstairs wardrobe key that fits nowhere, but is still important. You carry them in a pouch tied tightly to your belt, and you touch them reflexively, like prayer beads. Losing them would be a career-ending scandal, possibly a beating, possibly exile, possibly worse, permanent latrine duty. By late afternoon, the lists have turned to logistics. A shipment of salted herring is late, a bolt of velvet has gone missing, a priest drank too much and is asleep on the chapel floor, the kitchen is out of vinegar, the stables need more hay, the steward has opinions. You listen, you nod, and you draft a polite response in the chamberlain's hand. Sometimes you draft love notes. Yes, really. There's a noble lady who insists on communicating only via letters. She dictates them to you behind a curtain while feeding her lapdog strawberries soaked in cream. You write what she says, edit out the madness, and deliver the wax-sealed nonsense to a knight who blushes like a baker's oven every time he opens one. Evening approaches, candles again. You pass through the halls with a taper and a snuffer, relighting what's gone out, trimming what's burned too low. The halls are quieter now. The nobles drink, the servants breathe, and you are somewhere in between, not invited to either world, but required in both. You check on the guest rooms again, fluff the rushes, straighten the curtains, ensure that no one has died, spilled wine, or eloped without proper documentation. By now, your feet hurt, your head pounds, and your fingers are stained with wax and ink. You haven't eaten since morning, but you won't eat until the chamberlain finishes his supper and dismisses you. Sometimes he forgets. You sit outside his chamber for an hour while he recounts stories from his youth to a bored page boy who probably dreams of becoming a knight. You doze with your chin in your palm and your stomach caving in. Eventually, the door opens. You're dismissed with a flick of 2 fingers. You bow, murmur thanks, and retreat to the servants' quarters. Your bunk is narrow, the fire's out. Someone else has stolen your blanket again. You lie down, still half-dressed, and stare at the ceiling. You wonder if this is what power smells like: tallow, ink, sweat, and lavender. You used to think working near the nobles would be exciting, that you'd hear secrets, learn how power works. You've heard the secrets, all right, mostly about hemorrhoids, stolen pastries, and who thinks whom is insufferable. As for power, it's just more rules, more ways to fail. The chamberlain says you're learning discipline. What you're learning is exhaustion, how to be invisible, indispensable, and ignored at the same time. You've become fluent in silence, skilled in being present but forgettable. There's talk of promotion. Maybe one day you'll be assistant to the steward or manage to sell her books. More likely, you'll keep doing this until your back gives out or your eyes go bad from reading numbers by candlelight. There's no pension, just a slower decline. And still you show up because your work keeps the chaos stitched together, because the castle doesn't run without you, because someone needs to make sure the salt stock matches the winter ration plans, and because if you don't, someone will notice. You drift off to sleep, counting barrels in your head. You dream in inventory. You wake when the first bell rings. It's still dark. You stand up, stretch your aching legs, and adjust your squeaky shoes. It's time to relight the candles and begin again. The other servants tolerate you, barely. You're not one of them, not anymore. You wear cleaner clothes. You use words like allocation and inventory, but you're not one of the nobles either. They forget your name even as you light their hearts and refill their inkwells. You exist in the gap, a walking reminder that power trickles down slowly and responsibility floods upward. And still you show up, because showing up is what keeps the castle standing. And tomorrow, like today, you'll carry the lists, count the candles, and be blamed for everything that goes wrong. You start your day in a barn that never quite sleeps. The horses stir before the sun rises, snorting clouds of steam into the frozen air. Hooves clattering softly in stalls layered with straw and the occasional rat. You are the stable boy. That means you shovel, you brush, you haul, you get kicked, often, but mostly you apologize to creatures that outrank you in both grace and nutrition. You sleep in the loft above the main stable, if you can call it sleep. The floorboards are thin, and the horses below never stop shifting. You hear everything. A tail swishing, a hoof stomping, the unmistakable sound of something large defecating very close to your pillow. Your hands are already cracked before dawn. You pull on the same stiff boots, the same sour-smelling tunic, and climb down the ladder. The cold hits you like a slap from God. You start mucking out the stalls, one by one, shovel, pitch, shovel again. It's not glamorous. It's not even tolerable. But it has to be done before the master of horse arrives, or else you'll spend the morning with a split lip and a lecture on discipline. You work fast, but not too fast. Moving too quickly spooks the horses, and spooked horses are worse than angry nobles. They bite, rear, and crush. You've already broken 2 fingers, and once got a hoof to the ribs that left you coughing blood for a week. Still, you love them, the animals. They don't lie, they don't yell, they don't pretend to be better than you. The stable smells like hay, manure, sweat, and horse, which is somehow worse and better than anything inside the castle. You don't mind it anymore. You've stopped smelling things the way regular people do. You know the scent of a healthy stallion versus one with colic. You can tell when a horse is nervous just by how it breathes. These animals make more sense than most people. After the stalls are cleared, you fetch feed. Heavy sacks of oats and hay bales stacked high in the loft. You lower them one by one, careful not to twist your back again like last winter. You nearly passed out and the master said, "He's faking it," before throwing a bridle at your head. Feeding is a delicate dance. Some horses are greedy, some are shy, some will bite your hand if you reach at the wrong moment. You've got scars to prove it. You pat their necks, check their hooves, and whisper nonsense to keep them calm. They know your voice. They trust you more than most nobles ever will. Mid-morning means grooming. You brush, curry, clean hooves, and untangle manes. You pluck burrs, wipe noses, and scoop more dung than you care to count. If the Lord is riding, you polish the tack until it gleams, not because he'll notice, but because the master of horse will, and if anything is amiss, it's your hide that gets tanned, not the leather. Sometimes the nobles bring dogs into the stable, hunting dogs, loud, twitchy things with more pedigree than sense. You clean up after them too. No one ever says thank you. When the Lord decides to ride, and he always decides last minute, everything changes. The stable turns into a whirlwind. You saddle his best gelding, the one that doesn't like to be touched. You check the straps 3 times, wipe the bit with a cloth, make sure the stirrups are exactly how he likes them. Too short, of course, because fashion over function is eternal. Then you stand aside, quiet and invisible, while he mounts. If the horse fidgets, it's your fault. If he slips in the mud, it's your fault. If he falls and breaks a nail, it's probably still your fault. You'll hear about it for weeks. In the meantime, you fetch fresh water, sweep the yard, and stack more hay. The smell of leather and sweat clings to your skin. Your shoulders ache, your arms throb. You've pulled muscles you didn't know existed and bled in places that shouldn't. You get a break, sometimes, but it's not restful. You sit on a stool, sip warm ale from a tin cup, and stare at the dust motes drifting through the air like exhausted ghosts. You don't talk, your jaw hurts from clenching it, your body hurts from existing, but the horses still need brushing. In winter, it's worse. Your fingers go numb, even inside gloves. The troughs freeze. You break ice with a hammer just to get them a drink. Sometimes you wonder if anyone inside the castle even knows the stable has no insulation. In summer, you're a walking blister. You sweat through your tunic, your shirt, your soul. Evening arrives with flies, clouds of them. They gather in the corners of the stable. buzzing like tiny curses. You swat them away half-heartedly while cleaning out the last stalls. One of the older mares has soiled her bedding 3 times today. She's nervous. Bad weather's coming. You feel it in your joints, the way the air shifts. You know before the sky even darkens. You sweep again, you rake again, you scrub the troughs with a fistful of straw and an old brush that lost its bristles 2 years ago. No one replaces it, no one notices, but you. The master of horse checks in one last time. He grunts if he's pleased, yells if he's not. You've learned to measure your day in the distance between his voice and your face. You sneak a few carrots from a feed room, one for the gray mare who doesn't bite, one for the chestnut who only bites strangers. They nuzzle your hand with soft, velvet noses. It's the closest thing to affection you get. When the sun goes down, you climb the ladder to the loft again. Your bed is a pile of rags and straw. It smells like mildew and saddle oil. You lie down in your clothes. There's no point undressing. You'll only have to put it all back on in 5 hours. You listen to the horses breathing, the wind pressing against the wooden slats. You count hoofbeats in your dreams. You'll be up before dawn again. No one at court knows your name. They call you boy, even though you're nearly 17 and your back creaks like a drawbridge. When you pass in the halls, they wrinkle their noses, not because you're rude, but because you smell like a life they don't want to imagine. Still, some nod. The kitchen maid leaves you crusts. The blacksmith grunts a greeting. Once, a knight gave you a silver coin because you calmed his stallion before battle. You still have it. You don't plan to spend it. It's proof that you're not invisible. You're not stupid. You know you won't rise high. There's no ladder from stable boy to steward. No horse brush that turns into a sword. You're not going to become a knight, not even a squire. But you know animals, and that's something. You know how to wrap a wound, calm a foal, spot a lame leg before it gets worse. You matter in a quiet way. You've seen what happens to boys who can't take it. They leave, or break, or disappear one night after a whipping. No one asks questions. You do your job and keep your head down. In bad weather, the stables leak. In summer, the hay rots. In winter, your breath ices on the rafters. But the horses are still there, waiting, breathing, trusting. And that's enough. Not always, but most days. So you close your eyes, listening to the weight of hooves and straw, the creak of wood, and the soft breath of creatures that never judge you. Tomorrow it starts again. You are the stable boy, and the horses need you. You don't stay for the praise. There isn't any. You stay because the horses know your voice, because they nicker when they hear your boots, because in a world full of orders, lies, and punishments, this is the one place where you're trusted, not for who you are, but for how you move, how you speak, how you listen. And that kind of trust, that's rare, even in a castle. You wake up with a paw in your mouth again. It belongs to a turnspit dog, short-legged, long-bodied, vaguely miserable, like a sausage with trauma. He's sprawled across your straw pallet, snoring softly, his fur matted with kitchen grease and what might be duck fat. You don't mind. He's warm, and honestly, he smells better than most of your coworkers. You're the turnspit dog keeper, which means you are the invisible, overworked, underfed bridge between noble cuisine and the medieval animal treadmill. Yes, that's a thing. The dogs run, the spit turns, the meat cooks, and someone has to make sure the dogs don't die, snap, or sit down mid-roast. That someone is you. Your shift begins before the fire's even lit. You get up, stretch your back until it clicks, and immediately step in something wet. Hopefully water, probably not. The dogs are restless. They know what's coming. You haul the first of them from the pallet, a stubborn mutt named Snipe. He bites you lightly. You deserve it. He's been on spit duty 3 days in a row. You rub his ears, mutter an apology, and lead him into the kitchen. The fires are already smoking. The cook is yelling about Swan again. You open the turnspit wheel. It looks like a hamster wheel. If hamsters weighed 30 pounds and had job-related trauma. Snipe crawls in. You latch the gate behind him. He starts walking. The spit begins to turn. The roast, boar, maybe, begins to spin. Now you watch, you time, you bribe, you beg. The trick is keeping them moving without pushing them too hard. If the dog slows down, the roast cooks unevenly. And the cook throws things, hot things, sharp things, emotional things. If the dog stops completely, the spit jerks, the meat slips, and you spend the rest of the morning being told that you've ruined Christmas. It's May. There are 4 dogs. You rotate them like wheels on a cart, 2 on duty, 2 resting. But none of them really rest. They just whine, twitch, and gnaw on old bones in the corner while you rub their legs and whisper encouragements like you're raising canine gladiators. You clean the wheels too, not because anyone tells you to, but because they squeak loud enough to make the cook's temples throb. You learned that lesson last month when a squeal mid-banquet earned you a ladle to the forehead. Sometimes the Lord himself walks through. He doesn't speak to you, just nods vaguely toward the meat and compliments the earthy flavor. That's your sweat and probably some dog hair. You're welcome. Feeding the dogs is another gamble. They're not supposed to eat scraps from the noble table, but you do it anyway. No one wants to run on an empty stomach, and dried peas aren't exactly performance fuel. So when no one's looking, you slip them bits of goose fat or crust soaked in gravy. They love you for it, until one of them bites your thumb off, which almost happened last week. Burns are common. Your forearms look like parchment. The kitchen is a furnace, even in winter. It's a wall of smoke, heat, and shouting. In summer, it becomes a punishment from God. The fire never goes out, not really. Even at night, it smolders, and you sleep nearby, just close enough to be useful, just far enough to be forgotten. You've inhaled so much ash that your snot comes out black. Your cough sounds like a dying bellows. Your eyes are permanently red, which at least hides the tears. You used to think dogs were cheerful, loyal, friendly. Now you know better. These are working dogs, bred not for companionship, but for endless mechanical endurance. They don't want affection, they want your bread. And if you're late feeding them, they organize a rebellion. You once walked into the wheel room to find 3 of them sitting in a circle, chewing your shoe. No one taught you how to train them. You just learned by trial, error, and blood loss. You keep a stick nearby, you don't like using it, you really don't, but sometimes they refuse to run. Sometimes they dig in their paws and stare at you with the eyes of an animal who knows it's part of a joke it can't understand. You've named them all: Snipe, Button, Moors, Guts. Guts is the mean one. He only likes you when you feed him bacon grease. Otherwise, he growls like a brewing storm and snaps at your ankles when he's off duty. You think he sees the world the same way you do, tired, greasy, and full of smoke. Once, a noble child wandered into the kitchen. She pointed at the dog wheel and said, "Look, a spinning puppy." You smiled. Then her tutor yanked her away and glared at you like you'd exposed her to something indecent. You didn't say a word. You never do. At some point, you realize your posture's changed. You walk hunched now, from years of ducking under low beams, crouching beside dog pens, and carrying iron spits still hot from the fire. Your hands are covered in calluses and burns. Your knees ache when it rains. You're 17. You used to dream of being a falconer. You thought maybe you'd train birds, walk through forests, wear a leather glove, and squint at the sky like you understood something. Now you can't even hear birds over the constant drumming of paws in a wheel. When you do get a moment alone, you sit by the back door, just out of sight. You let one of the dogs curl up next to you, usually Moors, the quiet one. She's the only creature in the kitchen that doesn't demand anything. She just breathes, warm and real, and you rest your head against her side for a minute, maybe 2. Then the bell rings again. More meat, more spinning. No one thanks the dog. No one thanks you. At night, you scrub the grease from your arms with sand and prayer. You curl up in straw, listening to the slow pant of sleeping dogs and the lingering sizzle of fat in the hearth. You dream of running, not from anything, just running, and the wheel keeps turning. Sometimes you hear the nobles talk about the charm of rustic kitchens. They mean the decor, the roasted swan, the smell of herbs they think came from the garden and not from the sweat of the scullery maid who harvested them barefoot in the dark. They don't know you exist. They don't know the dogs exist. If they do, they think it's quaint, a detail for the minstrels to include in their songs, the turning hounds of House Waxford, or something equally oblivious. You once overheard a bard say that turnspit dogs enjoy the exercise. You nearly choked on your own laugh. You've learned a strange patience working here. You don't argue, you don't complain, you just keep the wheel turning. You feed the dogs, tend the injuries, clean the wheel, and hope the day ends without blood. You've seen worse. One boy got his hand caught in the gearing last year. He doesn't work here anymore. You're not sure if he died or just became someone else's problem. You have a small cloth pouch hidden behind a beam. Inside is a bit of cheese you've been saving, a button shaped like a flower, and a dog's tooth. Guts lost it during a particularly bad day. You keep it like a relic, a reminder that even the meanest dog can break under pressure. Your ears ring from the shouting, from the heat, from the spin. Your bones hurt, your stomach is never quite full, but every once in a while, one of the dogs nuzzles your arm after a long run. And in that brief, strange moment, you feel seen, not by the castle, not by the cook, but by something living. And for now, that's enough. Because in this place, even the smallest kindness, a warm side, a steady breath, a dog that doesn't bite, is worth holding on to, especially when the fire never goes out and the wheel never stops. You fall asleep to the sound of paws on wood and wake to the same, as if the night itself is on a spit, slowly turning. You wake well before dawn, in darkness and cold. The castle walls don't hold warmth, not for the likes of you. The embers in the hearth are long dead, and your breath fogs in the air above your rough blanket. You sit up, every joint stiff from yesterday's labor. Your hands are already sore, though you haven't touched water yet. You are the laundress, and that means water, soap, fire, and pain. You dress quietly, pulling on a damp wool kirtle that smells faintly of smoke, tallow, and lye. The apron goes over it, stained and stiff with salt from old sweat and splashes of boiled linen water. You wrap a scarf around your hair, shove your feet into cracked leather shoes, and move like you're already late, because you are. The castle is mostly asleep as you pass through the cold stone halls, carrying a basket filled with the previous day's laundry. Shirts yellowed with sweat, underthings damp with fear, linen napkins stained with wine or worse. Some of these pieces belong to nobility, and any error, any shrinking, tearing, staining, will be treated as a personal offense. You've seen girls dismissed over a scorched tablecloth. You've nearly been whipped over a missing chemise. In the courtyard, you fill 2 wooden buckets at the well. The pump groans. The water splashes cold and loud in the morning silence. You carry the buckets, balanced on a yoke over your shoulders. It digs into your skin with every step, past the smokehouse, past the scullery, to the yard where the great copper-boiling pot waits, blackened over yesterday's ashes. You light the fire underneath with trembling hands and flint. By the time the water starts to steam, the air is sharp with smoke and your fingers are red with cold. You mix in a scoop of lye, made from hardwood ash you soaked and filtered last week. The liquid goes cloudy. You stir it with a long wooden paddle, careful not to let it splash. The burns on your arms are still healing from the last time you slipped with the lye water heating. You sort the laundry, coarse linens in one pile, fine ones in another. The lord's shirts and the ladies' undergarments are treated with reverence, not for what they are, but for what happens to you if they're returned imperfect. Woolens stay separate. You don't boil wool. You've seen a full cloak reduced to the size of a doll's coat in one careless afternoon. You begin with the soak. Linens go into the hot, lye-laced water and are stirred gently to loosen the stains and stench. Then comes the scrubbing, at a flat stone slab near the well. You kneel and press a servant's tunic down hard against the rock. You rub soap into the fabric, black soap made of tallow and lye, harsh on the cloth and worse on your hands. You scrub in strokes, knuckles whitening. The stone is rough, and the cloth is heavy, waterlogged, and stubborn. When you dunk it into a barrel to rinse, the water clouds instantly. You smile faintly progress. The rinse water is cold, so cold your fingers go numb within minutes. You work anyway, switching hands, clenching them to keep the blood moving. Every now and then, you blow on your fingers and flex your wrists, but it barely helps. You think of other women, the scullery maids, the wood carrier, and know they're cold too. It doesn't make you feel better. It just reminds you you're not alone. Once the worst of the dirt is out, you haul the linens to the stream that runs behind the outer wall. There, in the shallows, you beat the larger items, sheets, tablecloths, with a wooden paddle. You swing and smack and swing again, the water splashing up your sleeves. Every blow knocks out dirt, Every splash soaks your skin. You can barely feel your knees in the mud. Around you, a few washerwomen from the village do the same. No one speaks. No one needs to. The only sound is water, wood, and the occasional sigh. When the linens are beaten, rinsed, and twisted dry by hand, a process that leaves your shoulders screaming, you drape them over bushes or on long ropes strung between trees. In summer, they dry in the sun. In winter, you hang them near the hearth, praying they don't catch fire. Damp fabric and open flames make uneasy neighbors. You tend the fire again, check the boil, stir the next batch, fetch more water. You lose track of time in the repetition. Haul, soak, scrub, rinse, hang. By midday, you can't feel your forearms. By afternoon, your lower back is a knotted rope. There's a moment, though, when the lady's veil comes clean, a stubborn wine stain finally gone. You hold it up, steaming white against the smoke-dark sky, and feel a flicker of pride, brief. Then you spot a fray at the hem and mutter a curse. You'll have to patch it and pray no one notices. When all is hung and steaming gently in the afternoon wind, you sit for a moment on an upturned bucket, just to breathe. You tear a bit of crust from the pocket of your apron. Hard bread, mostly stale, but food all the same. You chew slowly and watch the linen dance in the wind. Then you're back at it, collecting the dry, folding the crisp, cold shirts, checking for mist stains or lingering damp. You sort the noble garments into a separate basket, laying a cloth between each folded item like layers of armor. You'll deliver these by hand, quietly, without making eye contact, without drawing attention. You are invisible. You must stay that way. At the kitchen door, you exchange a nod with a scullery maid who smells like fish and onions and exhaustion. Inside, the cook shouts something about missing cloths. You wordlessly pass her a folded bundle of kitchen rags. She grunts her thanks. You leave before she can remember your name. The last stop is the Lord Solar. You knock, a servant answers. You hand him the basket with a practice bow. He doesn't thank you. He closes the door. Your hands are raw, your neck aches, your back feels twisted, but nothing is stained, nothing is missing. That means today was good. You return to the laundry yard to put out the fire, empty the tubs, and rinse the soapstones. A sheet has blown loose and lies half in the mud. You grab it before anyone sees. It's only a little dirty. You'll wash it again tomorrow. You don't complain. There's no point. At last, just as the sun begins to set behind the battlements, you sit again, this time longer. You hold your hands out toward the fading warmth of the fire and feel the pain pulse back into them. Your nails are chipped, your fingertips are peeling, but they still work. In your apron pocket, you carry a scrap of linen, a torn piece from a ruined towel. You've been sewing it into a handkerchief in quiet moments. There's no time for that tonight, but just knowing it's there gives you something that belongs only to you. You eat in the servants' hall, pottage, bread, warm ale. You eat quickly, quietly, eyes low. Then you return to your pallet near the chimney. Your shift is over. Tomorrow will be the same: water, soap, fire, and pain. But tonight you sleep. You've seen this before. If she rolls too much, she could twist something inside. You throw open the stall door and grab a halter. She thrashes, nearly catches your leg, but you hold on. You tug her up, walk her in tight circles. Her eyes roll white. You keep whispering, keep moving. A stable master shows up eventually, curses, and takes over. You step back, shaking. Your arms are covered in dirt and spittle. Your tunic is ripped, but she's standing now. That's something. You return to your rounds. 2 new guests have arrived. Their horses are skittish from the road. You soothe them as best you can, soft words, firm hands. One of them nips your sleeve. Another stomps and misses your toe by a hair. You fill troughs again, fetch more hay, sweep the aisle for the 3rd time. You mend the torn girth strap with twine and a bone needle. It's not pretty, but it will hold. The sun sinks behind the outer wall. The wind picks up. You close the stable doors, hang the lanterns, and check each horse one last time. You rub noses, check hooves, refill water buckets. You pat Smoke's neck, avoid Gorse's teeth, and scratch behind Willow's ears. When it's all done, you climb the ladder to the loft. You peel off your boots and flex your raw feet. You're covered in dust, hay, and sweat, but no one was kicked, nothing burned. No horses escaped. That makes it a good day. You eat a second meal in the loft. Some cheese you traded a favor for, and a hunk of onion bread too hard for the kitchen to keep. You chew slowly, legs tucked beneath you for warmth. Outside, the castle glows faintly with torchlight. Laughter floats from the great hall. Somewhere, a minstrel plucks a lute string. You hear it through cracks in the wood. It sounds like a dream someone else is having. You don't mind. The horses below shift in their stalls. One snorts, one whinnies softly. They're settling, same as you. You lie back in the straw, arms folded under your head. Your fingers ache, your knees crack when you stretch, your back feels like a plank, but you're not dead, and none of the animals under your care are either. That counts for something. You think about the stories they tell about knights, kings, tournaments. They all forget the boy who saddled the horse, who mucked the stall, who whispered to the animal that would carry a lord into glory or death. That's fine. You're not here to be remembered. You're here to work and to sleep when the work is done. The wind rattles the shutters below you. Hooves scuffle, and slowly, the weight of the day pulls you down into sleep. Your last thought is of a hoof print, perfectly stamped in the mud, rimmed with frost, still steaming from the warmth of the horse that left it. It won't last. It'll vanish by morning. But for now it's real, and so are you. You wake with a jolt, the butt of your spear still clutched in one hand. You must have nodded off again, but only for a moment, you're sure of it. The brazier beside you is nearly out, just a few orange coals crackling faintly in the darkness. You rub your eyes, shift your weight on the cold stone bench, and peer through the arrow slit beside you. Still night, still fog, still your watch. You're the castle guard, not a knight, not a soldier, not a man-at-arms with songs written about him. Just a guard. You stand, you wait, you freeze, and if something goes wrong, you're the first to die. It's your second night shift this week, and your knees already ache. You roll your shoulder, feel the bruise from yesterday's training drill. A wooden blade slammed into your side hard enough to rattle your ribs. The sergeant called it a learning moment. You called it something else, silently. Your job is simple. Watch the gate, watch the wall, walk the perimeter when the bell strikes the hour, report anything strange, and don't fall asleep. You listen for the bell now, distant, muffled. The wind whistles through the murder holes overhead, sharp and steady. You pull your cloak tighter. The wool is thin and doesn't help much, but it's all you're issued. Your breath fogs in the torchlight, curling into the stillness like smoke from a dying fire. You stretch your legs and walk a slow circle around the gatehouse interior. The stone floor is slick with old condensation and soot from the torches. You know every crack, every uneven flagstone. You've paced it too many times to count. At the outer parapet, the wind hits harder. Your cloak flaps against your legs. The courtyard below is quiet. A lone dog sniffs around the kitchen door. Somewhere, a drunk stumbles out of the barracks latrine, mumbling a tune and failing to close the door behind him. You don't call down. Not your problem, not tonight. You check the iron hinges on the main portcullis, still locked, still rusted, still your responsibility if it jams when it's needed most. You run your gloved hand down the edge. It's freezing to the touch. You think about the day shift, better in some ways, sunlight, warmth, people to talk to. But during the day, there's shouting, drills, inspections. At night, you're alone, forgotten. Except if someone breaks in, then suddenly everyone remembers the night guard. Back inside, you take your seat again. You tilt your head and rest it briefly against the cold stone wall. Your helmet's off, too heavy for hour 7 of nothing. You rest your hand on your spear like it's a staff or a crutch, maybe both. You hear something, a sound just beyond the gate, not a voice, not quite a footstep. You stand too fast, your knees complain. You move toward the door, grip your spear, hold your breath. It's nothing. A bird, maybe, or the gate settling in the frost. You wait a few moments longer, then exhale slowly and return to your post. False alarm. You're jumpy tonight. Can't afford not to be. You sit again, slowly. Your joints creak like a drawbridge. You pull a strip of dried meat from your pouch, cold, hard, a bit of gristle stuck to the edge. You chew slowly, jaw aching. This is dinner. Once, a noble boy sneered at your meal as he passed. He had a pastry in one hand and a silk handkerchief in the other. You didn't say anything. You just kept chewing. That's what guards do. Keep chewing, keep watching, keep standing, until they don't. You remember your first winter watch. Toes numb for days, fingers purple, skin cracked and bleeding. You learned the trick of wrapping wool inside your boots, layering grease cloth under your gloves. It helped a little. Midnight bells toll. You stand and make your round from the eastern tower to the west, past the armory, past the chapel. You pause there, light flickers in the chapel window. The priest must be praying again. He never sleeps either. You climb to the wall walk and scan the woods beyond the outer bailey. Black trees sway in a sea of mist. The moon casts a pale stripe across the fields. You see no movement. You see everything. You think of your mother's farm, of harvest moons and cider, and wonder if she's still there. You hope she is. You make it back to your post just as the brazier dies completely. You don't bother relighting it. The cold keeps you awake better anyway. Sometime after the last bell, the captain arrives. His boots echo on the stone as he enters. He doesn't speak at first, just looks you over, checks the ledger, taps the pike rack once with the butt of his halberd. Still breathing, he asks. Barely, you answer. He grunts, then passes by without further word. He never says, good work. You're not here for praise. You're here because someone has to be. You stretch once more, rotating your shoulder. The fog is lifting. The sky to the east is beginning to pale. Soon, the bells will ring for morning prayer, and your shift will end. The day guards will arrive, loud, well-rested, and freshly shaven. You'll nod hand off your spear and disappear back into silence. You descend the tower steps and make your way to the barracks. Your cot is rough. The blanket smells of mildew and smoke, but it's yours. You peel off your cloak, set your boots beside the bed, and sit a long moment before lying down. As your eyes begin to close, you hear the castle come alive. Shouting in the yard, buckets clanking, the cook's voice barking orders. You've earned your sleep, but you know you'll be back tonight. The castle doesn't guard itself. There was a time, last year, you still remember it, when bandits tried to storm the gate. Not many, just 6 or 7 desperate men, starving, drunk on stolen wine. They came after midnight, thinking the wall guards were asleep. You weren't. You sounded the bell. You shouted. You held the gate while others armed themselves. One of them, a tall one, with an axe, almost made it to the portcullis. You caught him with a spear thrust through the ribs. He collapsed at your feet, died gurgling in the dirt. You didn't sleep for 3 nights after that, but no one thanked you. The steward sent down an extra crust of bread. The sergeant nodded once, said, you did your job. That was it. You did sleep eventually. And when the bruises faded and the frostbite healed, you were posted right back on the gate, because now they trusted you to stay awake. That was your reward. You shift your weight again, bones grinding. Your hip has a knot in it from years of leaning on stone. You ignore it. You've gotten used to ignoring things, hunger, cold, the sneers of nobles, the fear of being the first to die if anything truly bad happens. And yet, despite everything, there's pride, not the kind people toast in halls, but the kind that keeps your back straight when no one is watching. You keep the castle safe. That matters, even if no one sees it. You adjust your gear one last time before bed. The leather straps of your jerkin are cracked, the iron studs dulled from years of wear. Your helmet, dented at the rim, hangs beside your bunk. You should replace it. You won't. It still works. Around you, the other guards breathe deep in sleep. Some snore. One twitches as if fighting in his dreams. You envy them. They've done their part. Now they rest. You lie on your side and stare at the wall. The mortar lines look like roads on a map, winding and uncertain. You trace them with your eyes until they blur. Somewhere above, in the solar, nobles stretch in feather beds. Below them, you sleep with a knife under your pillow and your cloak wrapped around your feet. And still, if something were to go wrong in the dead of night, it would be you they send first, because that's what castle guards are for. You close your eyes, and for a few precious hours, you don't have to watch anything. You rise in silence. It's not that anyone is asleep near you. It's that they're all long gone. The scullery maid is curled up by the hearth. The stable boy is vanished into straw. The cook's snores echo faintly through the kitchens. But your work begins now. In the hollow hours, no one else wants. You are the night watchwoman. You're not a guard, exactly. You don't wear armor. You don't carry a sword. But you walk the halls with a lantern in one hand and a key ring in the other. And if something catches fire, if someone cries out, or if something moves that shouldn't, it's your problem. You wear soft shoes, patched and tied with scraps of cloth. You move without echo, that's the rule. Your dress is wool, thick and plain, with extra layers underneath, because the corridors at night are cold enough to crack teeth. Your lantern clicks once as you light it. The tallow candle flickers, casting long shadows across stone. You check the nursery first. 2 noble children sleeping fitfully beneath embroidered quilts. You don't know their names. You know when they have fevers, though you know which one wets the bed. You straighten the blanket and leave without a sound. Next, the hall of tapestries. Grand scenes of battles and blood and glory. You pass them slowly, your flame dancing in the glassy eyes of long-dead nights. Something creaks behind you. You don't turn around, just keep walking. You're not paid to be scared. You pass the library next. It's locked, but you check the door anyway. The last time it was left open, rats chewed through a manuscript, and the steward barked about it for a week. You jiggle the handle. Firm. You move on. The chapel is quiet. A votive candle still burns at the altar. You pause to snuff it, not out of irreverence, but caution. Last winter, a stray ember nearly caught the drapes. You touch the iron candlestick to make sure it's cold, then continue. You climb a narrow stairway, lantern held high. Your legs ache. This is your 3rd round tonight, and the castle isn't small. You walk with purpose, not hurried, not slow. Your ears stay sharp. You hear the creak of wood, the scuttle of mice, the faint drip of condensation off stone. You know every sound the castle makes, what's normal, what isn't. In the east wing, you find a window open. That's not right. It's latched from the inside during supper hours, and no one has reason to open it now. You set your lantern on the floor and close the window quietly. You don't report it. The steward doesn't believe in ghosts. You do. You check the laundry room next. Rows of steaming linens hung from rafters earlier are now stiff with cold. You tug one cloth down, a noble's cloak. Someone left it too close to the wall torch. The hem is singed. You sigh. You'll fix it yourself before anyone notices. You take the cloak with you, folded under your arm. You'll mend it in the still hour before dawn, when the fire is low and your fingers shake from exhaustion. The kitchen corridor is next. A pot left on the hearth still steams faintly. You lift the lid, onion broth, thin and sour. You dip a crust of bread into it, careful not to take too much, just enough to feel like a person again. You don't eat with the others. You're not on their schedule. No one saves you a plate, but you've learned which shelves hide a wedge of cheese or a shriveled apple. The cook pretends not to know. Maybe she pities you. Maybe she once walked these same halls. You check the stair to the Lord Solar. You do not go up. You're not permitted. That's where the other world lives. The world with featherbeds and warm slippers and voices that ring with command. You just watch it from below. You head toward the servants' dormitory. A baby cries behind one door. You knock gently. A mother opens, blurry-eyed. You pass her a flask of warm water. She nods thanks without speaking. You leave her to it. Sometimes when the castle sleeps, the walls feel alive, not haunted, exactly, but heavy with all the lives passing through them. The floor beneath your feet was scrubbed by 1,000 women before you. The stone arch above you was carved by someone who's been dust for centuries. You don't feel small, you feel connected. That's what keeps you moving. You take your final round just before dawn. The lantern is low now. You tilt it to coax out more light from the stub of candle, but there's not much left. The flame flutters, casting dancing shadows along the hallway walls. You pass through the lower storerooms, eyes peeled for anything out of place. This is where the rats come, where a spark could start a fire that would eat the whole castle. You pause by the armory door. It's cracked. That's wrong. You step inside, heart quickening. You don't have a weapon, just your keys, just your voice. You scan the racks, swords, pikes, axes, all accounted for. You check the back wall, nothing, no one. A draft must have nudged the door, or someone left it unlatched. Still, you shut it firmly and slide the bolt home. Back at your seat near the kitchen hearth, you finally let yourself rest. You set the lantern beside you, unwrap the cloak you carried, and pull out needle and thread. The mending takes time. Your stitches are slow, but even. You've done this before. You finish just as the bells toll for morning prayer. The castle stirs, a door creaks, someone groans, another day begins. You fold the cloak, return it to its peg, and climb to your cot above the linen stores, barely more than a shelf. You tuck your legs beneath your skirt, curl into yourself like a letter unopened, and close your eyes. The castle breathes around you. You sleep. There are moments in the middle of a night when you forget the hour entirely. The castle exists out of time, its own little world of shadow and draft and silence. The walls breathe, the rafters creak. You've learned to tell which sound means loose timber and which means wind. You carry a small pouch of salt in your apron, not for seasoning, for protection. The old cook told you once that evil things dislike salt, that if you ever saw something that didn't belong in the halls, you should throw it at its feet. You've never had to, but the pouch stays. In the east corridor, near the old chapel, there's a patch of stone colder than the rest, no matter the season. You step over it every time, just a habit. No one talks about it. Sometimes a nobleman's mistress will be out late, slipping from one chamber to another. You pretend not to see, you keep your eyes down. Your keys stay quiet. Secrets are not yours to keep, but they are yours to carry. You once caught the steward himself stealing candles, taking them from chapel stores to light his own hearth in winter. He locked eyes with you, said nothing. Neither did you. But a week later, you found a thick blanket folded on your cot, no explanation. You never mentioned it. These are the quiet trades of castle life, the unspoken debts and wordless bargains made not in coin, but in silence and stitches, and you are fluent in them. In the quietest part of the night, just before the birds begin to stir, you sometimes pause beneath the great window, overlooking the courtyard. You let the lantern hang low, just for a moment, and you look up. The stars shimmer, hard and cold and far beyond reach, but they're always there, no matter what happened that day, no matter what burns or breaks. The stars return. You think of your mother's stories. She used to say the night had ears, that it listened to the women who worked while others slept. And maybe it does. You've whispered your share of wishes into its stillness, most of them practical, none of them answered. Still, the watching comforts you. You take a slow breath, stretch your aching arms, and begin walking again. The same halls, the same locks, the same long shadows. Because someone has to, because someone always has, and tonight, as always, that someone is you. Hey, everyone. Tonight we're stepping into something ancient, brutal, and strangely familiar. A world of chamber pots, crowded tenements, and endless toil. This isn't the Rome you've seen in glossy movies or marble museums. No emperors, no gladiator jewels, just the daily grind of survival in a city built on the backs of people history forgot. So before we descend into the underbelly of the Roman Empire, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're into this kind of slow, gritty storytelling. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far this little sleep experiment travels. All right, turn the lights down low. Maybe throw on a fan or get settled under the covers because you're about to wake up in ancient Rome, and odds are you're not making it to nightfall. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Rome. Not in a palace, not in a marble villa surrounded by fountains and toga-clad servants swirl grapes. No, you've landed where most people lived, where the plumbing is theoretical, the walls are one good fart away from collapse, and your upstairs neighbor is always stomping around like a gladiator on leg day. You're in an insula, the Roman version of an apartment building. Sounds promising, right? Maybe something with a courtyard, a bit of sunlight? Wrong. The Latin word insula literally means island, and that's the first clue that you are absolutely stranded. You're on the 4th floor if you're lucky. Anything higher than that, and you're basically living in the rafters of a fire hazard. These buildings are made of brick, wood, and wishful thinking. They sway in the wind, lean against each other like drunk friends, and have an average structural integrity of a stale loaf of bread. And speaking of bread, don't even think about making toast. Open flames are banned because one bad cooking accident and the whole block goes up like a Saturnalia bonfire. Your room is about the size of a modern walk-in closet. There's a cot, term used generously, made of rope and straw, and a threadbare blanket that smells like every person who's ever used it before you. The walls are damp, stained, and close enough together that if you lie on your side, you can touch both without moving. You have no windows. Light filters in from a crack under the door and from a hole someone accidentally punched through the roof with a broom handle 3 tenants ago. There's no privacy. You share this space with 2 other people, one of whom is coughing with such dramatic flair that you briefly wonder if you're living in a poorly written tragedy. Spoiler, it's not drama. It's probably tuberculosis. Outside, the morning begins not with birdsong, but with the rumble of wooden carts and the melodious yelling of vendors hawking olives, fish, and something that may have been bred in a former life. A donkey brays like it's dying. Children cry like they're dying. And someone's already arguing over taxes 2 floors below. You stretch. Bad idea. Your back cracks like a papyrus scroll in a drought, and you immediately regret trying to act like someone whose spine hasn't been curled into a question mark by years of hard labor and a diet that consists mostly of beans and regret. You're about 27 years old, which makes you one of the older folks in the neighborhood. Most people die before 40, usually from some combination of injury, infection, or inhaling too much whatever it is that leaks from a latrine pit every summer. You shuffle out of bed barefoot. Of course you're barefoot. Shoes cost money, and if you had money, you wouldn't be living here. The floor is cold and sticky. Is it wine? Is it urine? Is it olive oil? It's probably all 3. You step around your neighbor's sleeping form and try not to kick the communal chamber pot. It's full. It's always full. Time to relieve yourself. Great. You've got options. Option 1, the aforementioned chamber pot, which will soon be dumped, drumroll please, right out the window. There's a whole system to it. You're supposed to shout cave before you launch the contents onto the street below, which means watch out in Latin. But let's be honest, nobody does. The streets reek of urine, feces, spoiled food, and dead dreams. The gutters are open, the waste flows freely, and if you're lucky, the rain hasn't washed it all back toward your front door. Hygiene, you ask? That's adorable. There are no showers, no soap, no toothpaste. You might wash your face in the public fountain if you're feeling fancy and don't mind sharing your morning splash with 14 other people and a stray dog licking a wound. You scrape your teeth with a stick. Maybe rub some ash on them if you're feeling bougie. Breath? It smells like a fermented mixture of old lentils and existential dread. Still, you pull on your tunic, your one tunic, and head outside. It's made of rough wool or linen, stained in ways you've long stopped trying to identify. It smells like mildew and human. No deodorant, no underwear. You tie it at the waist with a rope and hope it holds. If not, congratulations, you've just invented public indecency. Not that anyone cares. Modesty in Rome is mostly reserved for statues and upper-class poetry. Stepping outside is like entering a war zone of the senses. The street is already packed. Vendors scream, beggars shout, oxen defecate mid-step. Flies swarm in thick clouds over the fish stalls. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is being murdered or possibly just expressing itself. Someone's cooking something that smells like disappointment. Your neighbor's child runs past, barefoot and covered in something that might be jam, might be blood, might be both. You make your way down the street toward the communal bakery, one of the few luxuries you share with the rest of your block. You hand over your government-issued grain ration, a lump of barley flour wrapped in cloth. The baker takes it, adds it to the others, and hours later, you'll get back a small, hard, blackened loaf. It's barely edible, mostly ash from the public oven's coals. But hey, it's warm and it's yours. Assuming no one steals it first. Breakfast? Sure, let's pretend. If you're lucky, you get a bit of pulse, a thick gruel, made from boiled grains. It's what most poor Romans eat every day. Grain, water, maybe some chickpeas, maybe not. If you're having a good day, there's a drizzle of olive oil on top. If you're having a bad day, the drizzle is rat urine, and you don't know it yet. Meat? Only for the rich. Milk spoils too fast. Cheese? Maybe. Eggs? Only if you steal them from a chicken that lives under your stairs. Most protein comes from beans, lentils, and dreams. If you want fruit, it better be in season and unspoiled. Otherwise, you're just gnawing on the husk of an overripe fig and pretending it's a plum. You might stop by the latrina, a public latrine, to take care of business. If you enjoy the company of 12 other people doing the exact same thing, the bench has a series of holes, no dividers, and a shared sponge on a stick dipped in vinegar. That's the Roman version of toilet paper. You rinse it, wipe, and repeat. And you wonder why nobody makes eye contact in these places. After all this, it's barely mid-morning. You haven't even started work yet. But before you leave for your day job, which spoiler is physically and emotionally crushing, you pause for a moment and look around. The street is alive, smelly, chaotic, dangerous, but alive. Kids scream and chase each other. A street performer juggles knives with questionable skill. A merchant shouts about the healing power of fermented fish sauce. And the city breathes, chokes, and burps in one never-ending symphony of humanity. Your landlord? Never seen him. Repairs? Don't hold your breath. If your building collapses, it's not considered a tragedy. It's considered a Tuesday. Fires are common. So are floods. So is sudden, unexplained death. You're a cog in a system that views you as replaceable. You're not a citizen. You're a warm body, in a sense, a scroll. Your value is measured in how quietly you suffer. And you will suffer, because this is ancient Rome, not the Rome of marble forums and golden laurels. Not the Rome of historians and Hollywood. This is the Rome of slums and soot, of crowded insulae and chamber pots, of grit and groaning humanity. You're not Cicero. You're not Caesar. You're not even close. You're a peasant on the 4th floor, praying the 3rd doesn't catch fire again. And it's only the beginning of your day. Congratulations. You've survived your first Roman night without being robbed, choked by smoke, or crushed by your neighbor's drunken body rolling onto your sleeping mat. Not bad. But the gods are generous today, and you've earned the privilege of waking up to the sweet, piercing sound of yelling. It's not an alarm clock. It's never an alarm clock. It's your neighbor yelling at his wife, or the vendor below your window screaming about fish, or the chamber pot hitting the cobblestones after someone above you dumped last night's wine and body fluids out the window. Morning in ancient Rome begins not with birdsong, but with complaints, sewage, and regret. Your eyes crack open to a ceiling, so low you could punch it sitting up. You're lying on a straw mat shared with your younger sibling, your cousin, possibly a stranger, who paid your landlord 2 denarii to squat in the corner overnight. The air smells like feet, garlic, and mildew. You wonder briefly if you died and woke up in Hades, but no, you're still alive. Unfortunately, your home, generously called an insula, is a Roman apartment building made of wood, dreams, and flammable lies. You're on the 3rd floor, which is slightly less deadly than the 5th. Higher up means cheaper rent and a better chance of dying when the whole building inevitably collapses. Down below, the rich enjoy sturdier homes and indoor plumbing. Up here, you enjoy rats, water leaks, and the subtle creaking that reminds you this structure is held together by hope and mold. You swing your legs over the side of your mat and immediately regret it. The floor is damp. It's always damp. Water, wine, blood, who knows? The answer doesn't change the fact that your only sandals were stolen last week, and you've been walking barefoot ever since. You gingerly avoid the sticky patch in the corner and stand, stretching your aching back like a cat that's being kicked down a flight of stairs. Time to wash up, you say. Cute. There is no basin, no sink, no soap. You wipe your face with a damp cloth that may or may not have once cleaned your landlord's armpits. Your version of a morning skincare routine involves rubbing oil on your skin and then scraping it off with a curved blade called a strigil, which sounds elegant until you realize it's just ancient Roman exfoliation by pain. You're basically buttering yourself like toast and then peeling it off. If you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse and have a few coins left, maybe you can get cleaner later. But right now, hygiene is a luxury. You settle for smearing your face with whatever water you find in a communal jar and call it refreshed. Now comes breakfast. Brace yourself. The Roman equivalent of a power breakfast is nothing. The morning meal is called ientaculum, which is Latin for don't get your hopes up. It usually consists of yesterday's bread, hard as marble and lovingly stored in a mouse-infested clay pot overnight. You soften it by dipping it in watered-down wine, a drink that tastes like vinegar with trust issues. If you're feeling fancy, maybe you get some olives or a smear of garum, the famous Roman fermented fish sauce that smells like low tide and failure. It's Rome's favorite condiment, used on everything from meat to vegetables to moments of crushing despair. It's the ketchup of the ancient world. If ketchup were made from rotting mackerel. There's no coffee, no eggs, no fruit smoothie with collagen powder. Your breakfast has one job: prevent immediate death. It succeeds barely. You chew in silence while your neighbors scream about something, probably taxes or bread rations. Or maybe it's that guy on the second floor who keeps sacrificing pigeons in the hallway. You don't ask. The rule of thumb in Roman tenement life is this: the less you know, the longer you live. Once you've gnawed your way through a slice of disappointment and sipped your wine-flavored sadness, it's time to dress for the day. Don't get excited. You have two garments, a tunic made from rough wool and a threadbare cloak that's more whole than fabric. The tunic itches. The cloak stinks. And both have been repaired so many times they're basically held together with prayers and the dreams of better fabric. Underwear? Hilarious. You tie a belt around your waist to keep everything vaguely attached and hope no one notices. Your left shoulder is always exposed because the fabric keeps sliding off. The rich wear togas. You don't. Togas are for citizens, people with status. You're a pleb, a non-citizen if you're an immigrant, a nobody if we're being honest. If you wear a toga, you're either delusional or planning to be arrested for impersonating someone with dignity. As you step outside, you're hit with the full sensory assault that is a Roman street. The noise is immediate. Vendors hawking their wares, street musicians playing instruments no one asked for, philosophers debating loudly. And someone somewhere is always screaming about cucumbers. It's chaos. Organized, smelly chaos. The streets themselves, paved with stones and slick with everything: animal waste, human waste, mystery slop that no one wants to identify. Rome has sewers, yes, but they serve the rich neighborhoods. Your street is self-cleaning, by which we mean rain occasionally washes the filth into someone else's neighborhood. It's a system. You walk carefully, avoiding puddles and people. A cart barrels past you, pulled by donkeys, and driven by a man who seems genuinely angry that pedestrians exist. There are no sidewalks. There are no traffic laws. There is only instinct, prayer, and the faint hope that the gods are paying attention. You pass temples where people line up to offer sacrifices, flowers, coins, small animals, or the occasional desperate plea. You don't have anything to give, so you nod awkwardly at Jupiter's statue and keep moving. He probably wasn't listening anyway. If you're headed to work, and most likely you are, congratulations. That means you didn't starve to death yesterday. Work in ancient Rome is not fulfilling. It is not purpose-driven. It is survival in a tunic. You might be a laborer hauling bricks or mixing mortar for one of the emperor's new vanity projects. Or maybe you're a porter, carrying goods up and down stairs in a building with no structural integrity. You might be a street cleaner, a fish seller, a potter, or worse, a public latrine attendant, paid in pity and bronze coins to sweep filth off marble, and pretend your soul isn't slowly escaping through your nostrils. The hours are long, the pay is miserable, and your boss might beat you for fun. If you're a slave, you don't even get paid. You just work. And if you complain, you're whipped. If you collapse, you're replaced. If you die, well, someone else gets your blanket. Midday approaches, and the sun is brutal. Rome's climate is hot, sticky, and utterly unbothered by your suffering. There's no air conditioning, no shade unless you cling to a building's shadow like a sweaty ghost. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your sandals, if you have them, slap against the stones with every exhausted step. And if you don't, your feet are slowly becoming part of the pavement. Lunch? Huh. It's called prandium. And if you're lucky, it's more bread, maybe a bit of cheese, maybe dried fruit, or a boiled egg if your employer had a good gambling night. You eat sitting on a step, watching richer Romans being carried around in litters like mobile royalty. You chew and try not to think about how you're probably consuming sand and rodent hair. As the day wears on, the smells intensify. The streets reek of sweat, garbage, and garum. You pass a bakery and inhale deeply, the scent of fresh bread temporarily tricking your brain into thinking life is worth it. Then you remember bread is taxed, and your landlord raised rent again, and your water jar cracked last night, and your cousin is still sick with whatever plague is currently fashionable. You keep walking. You keep surviving, because in ancient Rome, that's the entire point. And finally, after hours of back-breaking labor, social humiliation, and a mild sunstroke, you make your way home. You ascend the stairs of your insula carefully, because the staircase is made of splintered wood and shame. One misstep, and you're joining the spirits of the fifth-floor tenants who fell last week. You reach your door. You enter. It's dark, cramped, and smells like boiling cabbage, even though you don't have any cabbage. Someone is already asleep in your corner. You don't ask who they are. You just lie down next to them and close your eyes, hoping you don't dream about the bucket. And with that, your Roman morning ends. Was it glorious? No. Was it dignified? Absolutely not. But you survived. And, in ancient Rome, that counts for something. Tomorrow, you get to do it all again. You've survived your first Roman night in the insula. Barely. Sleep came in waves, interrupted by creaking floorboards above, shouting neighbors, the distant rumble of wagons, and an itching sensation on your leg that you'd rather not investigate. You're hungry now. Not the kind of hunger that inspires a brunch outing or a carefully measured protein shake. This is more primal, heavier. Your body wants fuel. But this is ancient Rome, and you're poor. So what you're about to experience isn't breakfast. It's survival. The Romans didn't believe in breakfast as a significant meal, not in the way we do. They had a word for it, ientaculum, a small early meal typically consumed by those who had to work long days. For the rich, it might consist of bread dipped in wine, cheese, olives, or even a bit of fruit. But you're not rich. You're a plebeian, one of thousands crammed into the belly of the city, eking out a life in the shadow of Rome's grandeur. For someone of your station, ientaculum is more of a formality than a feast. Maybe a crust of coarse bread, dry and unevenly baked. This bread is likely a leftover from the day before or the day before that, made from barley or spelt, grain types considered suitable for the lower classes. It's dense, dark, and has the mouth feel of something chipped from a wall. There's no butter, no jam, and certainly no eggs or honey. Those are the luxuries of someone with coin and status. What you might have, if luck has smiled upon you, is a bit of pulse. Pulse is the quintessential Roman peasant food, a porridge made from farro, emmer, or barley. It's cooked with water and occasionally seasoned with a drizzle of oil or the faintest hint of herbs, assuming you have any. It's not pleasant exactly. It doesn't nourish so much as it fills, a heavy, steaming paste that sits in the stomach like an anchor. On worse days, it might be prepared with river water or stored rainwater, slightly green and earthy. You eat it quickly. Slowly, just gives your brain time to realize it tastes like boiled dampness. And yet, this is your fuel. Pulse, maybe a bit of bread and water. If you're lucky, you've managed to secure some pasca, a common drink among the poor and the military. It's made by mixing vinegar with water, sometimes infused with herbs if available. It sounds unpleasant, and it is, but it's far safer than drinking untreated water straight from a public fountain or cistern. The acidity of the vinegar kills bacteria and masks the taste of unclean sources. It's sour and sharp, but it does the job. The public fountains of Rome flow constantly, fed by those legendary aqueducts. But that doesn't mean the water's clean where you live. Rome's water system was advanced, yes, but only until it reached the labyrinthine lower districts. There, the water quality depended heavily on the maintenance of lead pipes and the cleanliness of the castella, the distribution tanks feeding your block. And maintenance wasn't always a priority in neighborhoods like yours. If someone upstream threw garbage, urine, or animal remains into the drainage channel, or worse, into the water itself, you'd never know until it was too late. Hunger is a quiet constant for you. Even when you eat, it never really fades. Food is expensive, and most of your earnings go toward rent, taxes, or staying on the good side of your local Patronus. So you ration what little you have. You learn to chew slowly, savoring every bite like it's a luxury. There's no variety. You eat what's available, and more often than not, that means you eat the same thing every day. Meat? Almost never. The occasional salted fish, usually garum-cured scraps, or sardines so pungent they could double as weapons. Meat is reserved for the upper classes, for religious festivals, or as part of a soldier's rations. If you do get your hands on some, it's awful organ meat, bones, things the rich don't want. You don't waste a single scrap. As for fruits and vegetables, they appear sporadically. You might find some wilted leeks, onions, or turnips in the marketplace at a discount near closing time. Apples and figs are seasonal, and while Rome's Mediterranean climate makes such things abundant in theory, your wallet tells a different story. You buy what others don't: split fruit, half-rotten dates, bundles of wilted greens, all wrapped in yesterday's gossip and grime. It's edible, technically, you hope. And if you're truly desperate, there's the street food. Rome had an active street food culture, particularly for the poor who didn't have kitchens in their insula apartments. The papini, small taverns, or hot food shops lined the alleyways of working-class neighborhoods. For a few asses, the copper coins of the realm, you might get a bowl of stewed lentils, seasoned with whatever bones or drippings the cook could find. Perhaps a small skewer of meat, heavily salted and suspiciously chewy, or a honey cake made from stale grain, barely sweet and baked hard enough to require soaking before eating. These places are busy, smoky, and loud. They smell like hot oil, burned flour, and sweat. The clientele includes laborers, criminals, out-of-work veterans, and the occasional freed slave. They're not always safe. Fights break out. Money disappears. But they are only shot at something warm, and you keep coming back. It's important to understand that most Romans didn't cook their own food. The lower classes lacked private kitchens. Fire laws made it dangerous to cook in cramped wooden apartments. So communal ovens and public bakeries filled the gap. But that also meant you were always dependent on merchants, on bakers, on the shifting prices of olive oil and grain. Speaking of grain, it's the backbone of the Roman diet. The government knows this. That's why they introduced the annona, the grain dole, a state-sponsored distribution of grain to eligible Roman citizens. If you qualify, you receive a monthly allowance, enough to make bread or pulse for a few weeks. It's not generous, but it's better than nothing. For many, it's the line between hunger and starvation. But access isn't guaranteed. You need to be registered, male and Roman. If you're a woman, a foreigner, or a slave, the annona isn't for you. You find other ways. Food for you is rarely fresh. Bread goes stale quickly in the Roman humidity. Pulse clings to the bottom of pots long after it should have been scrubbed out. What you consume today was cooked yesterday or last week. Spoilage is common. Flies are constant. But waste is unthinkable. You eat around the mold. You scrape off the bad parts. You chew slowly, savoring what little flavor remains. And yet, despite all of this, the city never starves, not completely. Rome's granaries are full, its import steady. Ships from Egypt, Sicily, and North Africa sail in daily, their bellies full of grain, oil, and wine. The empire feeds its capital like a mother feeds a hungry child. You just don't always get your share. If you're a slave or a freedman in service, your meals depend on your master's whim. You might get stew, bread, or leftovers from the main table. Or you might go hungry until someone remembers you exist. If you're a day laborer, your meal breaks are dictated by your work. Dig ditches, haul stones, build baths, and maybe at mid-morning you get 10 minutes to gnaw a piece of dried fig or drink from a shared cup. And let's not forget feast days. Not because you're invited to the banquet, but because it's the one time the rich throw scraps to the streets. Religious festivals sometimes include public offerings, distributions of food or coin, perhaps a roasted pig or a platter of bread and fish for the masses. It's not kindness, it's politics. But you take what you can get. By mid-morning, your hunger has faded into something else, a dull pressure, a reminder. You've eaten just enough to continue. You tie the cloth belt around your tunic a little tighter and get moving. You've got work ahead of you. Rome doesn't wait. And tomorrow you'll eat again or you won't. But either way, you'll wake up in the same insula, with the same cracked bowl and the same stale loaf waiting on a wooden shelf. Because in ancient Rome, food is never far away, but neither is hunger. The sun has fully risen now, and the Roman day is underway. For you, a plebeian or perhaps a slave, that doesn't mean a slow stretch and a relaxing breakfast. It means the work begins, and it begins early. Rome is not a place of idleness for the lower classes. The empire may be vast, but the streets of the city feel like a funnel, where the sweat of thousands filters upward to benefit the few. Let's start with the plebeians, not the poorest of the poor, but far from comfort. Most plebeians in the city work trades: manual laborers, builders, bakers, water carriers, cobblers, street sellers. If you're skilled, maybe you're a stonecutter or you've secured a spot in one of the Roman guilds, the collegia. But for most, you're expendable muscle, hired for the day, paid by the hour if you're lucky. You don't have a fixed schedule. You have a need, a relentless knowing one. You work because not working means not eating. You wake before dawn, grab what counts for breakfast, maybe a crust of bread or a spoonful of barley mush, and head out to find work. The forum is one place you might go, not to debate philosophy, but to stand around and hope someone needs a labor. You're competing with hundreds of others. Some are stronger. Some have tools. You don't. You're hired, maybe, to carry bricks across a construction site. Rome is always being built: roads, aqueducts, arches, homes for the rich. It is said Augustus found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. You'll be the one dragging that marble, sweating and silent. The work is brutal. There are no labor laws, no unions, no breaks, no helmets, no complaints. If you fall off a scaffold, you're not given aid. You're given a nod and a shove to the side so the next man can take your place. You don't ask questions. You don't slow down. The overseer watches with a stick in hand, and he doesn't carry it for decoration. But perhaps you're not a plebeian. Perhaps you're a slave. Life, somehow, is harder still, because now you don't even get the satisfaction of wages. Your body is labor, and your labor belongs to someone else. You might be a household slave, owned by a moderately wealthy Roman citizen. If so, your work starts before sunrise. You're fetching water, cleaning floors, preparing meals you'll never taste. Maybe you're young and educated, assigned to tutor the children or read aloud to your master. It sounds better. It isn't. One mistake and you're beaten. If the master's wife is displeased, you're sold. There are no protections. No court to hear your case. You are property, like the stove or the sandals. Or you're a field slave outside the city, toiling in the vast latifundia, those enormous agricultural estates that feed Rome's grain-hungry stomach. Here, there are no roofs, no days off. You wake with the sun and bend until it sets. You plant, plow, harvest, sweat. No matter how hot, how cold, how sick you feel, you work. The overseer doesn't care if you collapse. There are chains for those who slow down. For those who run, there are whips. And for those who rebel, there's crucifixion, a public one, along the roads where others can see. Some slaves are trained for skilled labor, stone carving, pottery, weaving. But that doesn't make the whip any less real. It just means your blood stains a different kind of floor. And what of the women? If you are a woman, slave or free, you labor too. Not on the scaffold or in the forum, but in quieter ways that bleed just as much. You're grinding grain with a heavy stone hand mill, your arms aching as you turn the quern hour after hour. You make bread, wash clothes, fetch water, tend fires, clean, mend, weave. If you're poor, you might also sell small goods in the street or offer your services as a wet nurse or a midwife. In desperate cases, you might sell yourself. Prostitution is legal in Rome, taxed even. It is not a profession of glamour. It is survival. There are no toilets in your insula, no kitchens. So you make do in the alleyways or public spaces. Fires are frequent. The stairs collapse. Your children are not safe, not from hunger, not from illness, not from the building itself. Life expectancy is low. Infant mortality is high. Your child's best chance is to survive to 5. After that, it's still a coin toss. And yet, Rome moves on. The senators debate. The aristocrats drink wine on shaded terraces. Their banquets are filled with stuffed dormice and honey dates. Below them, unseen, you sweat, bleed, and endure. Your work is invisible but indispensable. The aqueducts flow, the grain ships arrive, the streets are swept because of people like you. Sometimes, the monotony is broken, not for a festival or a feast, but for something worse, a fire, a collapse, a riot. Rome is a tinderbox of labor and inequality. The gap between the rich and poor isn't just wide, it's weaponized. If a fire starts in your insula, the ladders don't reach the top. There are no fire escapes. You carry your children, your pots, your life on your back, and hope the flames stop before your floor is reached. Or maybe you're caught in a food riot. The grain is late, the bread is moldy, the people are hungry. You crowd the forum, shouting with the others, demanding your portion. The guards arrive, batons, shields, blood in the streets. You are dispersed, not heard. And then there's disease. Filth lines the alleys. Latrines overflow. The Tiber, your drinking source, is also a sewer. You wash clothes in it. You bathe in it. You drink from it. Parasites thrive. Illness spreads. You know the signs, a fever, the chills, a child coughing in the night. There is no doctor, no apothecary for your kind, only rest, prayers, and hope. And hope rarely comes. But still you work. Because if you stop, even for a day, the city forgets you. The empire forgets you. And hunger remembers you very, very quickly. This is what it means to work in ancient Rome, not to build wealth or rise in rank or find fulfillment, but to survive, to endure, to hope that perhaps your children will have slightly fewer blisters on their hands than you did. It is not glamorous. It is not heroic. It is labor at its most brutal, its most thankless. The empire was not built by emperors. It was built on the backs of men, women, and children who worked until they broke and then were replaced. Now, as the midday sun climbs overhead, your tasks are only half done. There is still cleaning, cooking, tending to the hearth, carrying water, hauling waste. Your stomach growls, your fingers cramp, your feet blister inside sandals that barely hold together. And no one is coming to relieve you. Not today, not tomorrow. Welcome to the workday in ancient Rome. You wouldn't last a single one. Congratulations. You've made it past the market, survived the street toilets, and managed not to get mugged for your shoes, if you were even lucky enough to have shoes. But now comes the real challenge, going home, or more accurately, climbing into the creaking, overcrowded, highly flammable tinderbox that you are expected to call home, your insula. You live in an insula not because you chose it, but because you're poor. And in ancient Rome, poor people don't have houses. They have layers, multi-story apartment buildings packed so tightly that sunlight is more rumor than reality. Your insula is 6, maybe 7 stories tall, illegal, technically, but so is half the city, and bribes are as Roman as togas. It's built of wood, clay, and wishful thinking, leaning slightly to one side, as if preparing to collapse out of sheer exhaustion. You climb the stairs slowly, carefully, because elevators haven't been invented yet, and the building sways when someone sneezes on the second floor. The higher you go, the worse it gets. Wealthier residents stay on the lower floors, better ventilation, easier access, and a lower probability of dying in a fall. You, on the other hand, are up near the roof, where the air is thin, the ceilings are low, and the rats have built a local economy. There are no private rooms, no insulation, and definitely no plumbing. Just a single room shared with your family, your livestock, and any opportunistic creatures that wander in through the cracks. The walls are made of mud brick, and your door doesn't quite close. But hey, you have a curtain. Luxury. And what about fire safety, you ask? Good question. Fire is your most constant, faithful threat, because every home needs fire to cook, to light, to warm. But there's no chimney, no ventilation, and no fire code. Open flames flicker from oil lamps and cooking hearths, inches away from the wooden beams that hold the whole place together. One spark, one gust of wind, and the entire block could be reduced to ash within the hour. Firefighters exist technically, but they are mostly slaves owned by the vigiles, the Roman fire brigade, and they're more interested in watching your insula burn so they can demand a bribe to intervene. In 24 CE, Augustus formed the vigiles to stop Rome from burning down every third Tuesday. But let's be honest, they're underpaid, overworked, and famously corrupt. If you can't pay, they'll let it burn and confiscate whatever's left. They call it enforcement. You call it a robbery with extra steps. So you live in constant fear of smoke. Every night, you sniff the air before you sleep, wondering if that's dinner next door or the beginning of the end. Your belongings, what few you have, are always packed for a quick escape. A blanket, a bowl, maybe a small idol of Lara's or Penates, the household gods who, at this point, you're hoping accept bribes too. And then there's the noise. Rome is never quiet. Carts aren't even allowed during the day, so they all roll through the streets at night. The wheels grind like thunder on stone. Vendors shout, drunks sing, lovers argue, dogs bark, and someone somewhere is always playing a flute badly. Privacy is a fantasy. Your neighbors hear everything, your arguments, your snoring, your gastrointestinal tragedies, and in return, you hear theirs. But maybe it's better than being alone, because loneliness isn't common here. Your insula is crowded beyond reason. Dozens of families crammed into units smaller than a modern bathroom. Children crying, adults arguing, and old folks muttering prayers in dark corners. Sometimes people rent just a corner of a room, sleeping upright against the wall like human coat racks. When it rains, your roof leaks. When it doesn't, it still leaks. The water trickles down the inside walls, pooling on the floor, feeding the mold that grows behind your bed mat. The floorboards creak. The walls shift in the wind. You develop the uncanny skill of waking up seconds before the stairs collapse beneath a neighbor. It's not a matter of if the building will fall. It's a matter of when. And if that wasn't enough, pests. Rome's rodent population rivals its human one. Mice and rats scamper through your pantry, if you have one, and leave behind little gifts. Flies buzz thick around your food. Mosquitoes breed in the drainage ruts. And then there are the bed bugs. You scratch yourself raw in your sleep and dream of itching. But despite all this, you survive. You learn to maneuver the collapsing staircases like a seasoned acrobat. You hang wet laundry on lines that sway over the alley, hoping it dries before thieves pluck it. You carry water up and waste down, always careful not to slip in someone else's garbage or your own. Still, the insula is not your sanctuary. It is a holding pen, a temporary space between disasters. Fires, floods, famine, and violence have all passed through this building like regular guests. And yet, it stands just barely. There are moments, strange and fleeting, where you feel pride. A neighbor offers you stale bread. A child tugs your sleeve to show you a dead bird. The woman across the hall sings while stirring her pot of lentils. You smile even if just for a second, because you all live in the same cage, facing the same storms. Rome is massive, over 1 million people, and the rich live in marble palaces with mosaic floors and private baths. But you know their lives only by rumor. For you, the insula is everything. Your bed, your shelter, your prison. And if the building collapses tomorrow, and it might, no one will mourn it. The rubble will be cleared, and a new insula will rise in its place, faster, cheaper, even more dangerous. The cycle continues, and you, if you're lucky, will rent a corner in that new box and begin again. Because in ancient Rome, the poor don't rest. They adapt. They huddle together in the dark, dodging embers and curses, hoping that the next collapse doesn't start with them. And if the flames come anyway, well, you'll grab your blanket, say a quick prayer to the Laras, and run like hell. You're parched. You've spent the morning toiling in the heat, surrounded by dust, noise, and the aggressive scent of humanity in full ferment. You want water, cold, clean, life-giving water. So you do what any Roman would do. You head for the nearest public fountain. Because in ancient Rome, you don't just turn a faucet and get crisp hydration. You rely on a sprawling, complex, and dangerously vulnerable infrastructure of aqueducts, cisterns, and communal outlets. And if any part of that system fails, so do you. Rome's aqueducts were a marvel of engineering. By the 1st century CE, the city was serviced by 11 massive aqueducts, some stretching over 50 miles from distant mountain springs. These channels brought in an estimated 200 million gallons of water per day, enough to supply baths, fountains, latrines, and private homes. But here's the catch. Only the rich had indoor plumbing. For the rest of the population, meaning you line up at one of the many public fountains scattered through the city's neighborhoods, clay jug in hand, hoping there's still pressure in the system. Now the good news is the water, when it gets there, is pretty clean. It's sourced from springs, and the aqueducts are designed with constant downward slopes to keep it flowing. The bad news is, clean is relative. If you live near the terminus of the system, you're getting backwash, water already passed through several baths, toilets, and industries. Add to that the occasional sabotage, illegal tapping, or natural sediment buildup, and you're not exactly sipping spring water, more like tepid mineral soup with a hint of lead. Because, yes, many pipes are made of lead. Not that the Romans understood the long-term neurological effects, but if your thoughts start feeling fuzzy and your coordination's off, don't blame the gods. Blame the plumbing. And if you think that's bad, just wait until nature calls. Most Romans didn't have private toilets. Apartment dwellers, like you in your top-floor insula, use pots, buckets, or chamber pots. When full, the contents are dumped out the window or into the nearest gutter. Yes, the famed Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, still runs through the city like an underground lifeline, but most waste doesn't make it that far. It sits in the street, baking in the sun, mixing with animal droppings, and slowly forming a biological miasma strong enough to peel paint off a fresco. And if you're wondering why shoes are so important in Rome, that's your answer. You're not walking on stones. You're walking on yesterday's dinner in its final form. There are public latrines, of course, and if you're lucky or desperate, you can pay a small fee to use one. These are long stone benches with holes carved in them, positioned over flowing water channels. There's no partition, no door, just a row of strangers making eye contact while trying to pretend nothing awkward is happening. You sit shoulder to shoulder with a retired centurion and a 12-year-old olive vendor, all contributing to the same stream of civic solidarity. The Romans believed in shared experiences. This was one of them. Toilet paper? Not a thing. Instead, you use a tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick kept in a bucket of vinegar water. It's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. You hope the guy, before you had good hygiene. He didn't. Nobody does. You wipe, you stand up, you wash your hands if there's water nearby, and then you move on, probably to the nearest bathhouse, which, thankfully, is where things get slightly better. The Roman bathhouse is part spa, part gym, part social network, and part biological experiment. There are over 800 public bath complexes in Rome by the time the empire is in full swing. Some are grand, like the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian, where marble columns soar above mosaic floors. Others are modest neighborhood baths, tucked between bakeries and brothels. But all follow roughly the same formula: a changing room, a potatorium, a warm room, tepidarium, a hot room, caldarium, and a cold plunge, frigidarium. You strip down, deposit your clothes. Good luck if they're still there when you get back, and start sweating your soul out in the heat. The caldarium is stifling, heated by hypocaust, underfloor heating fueled by roaring fires. It's a room designed to make you wish for death, or at least a breeze. You rub your skin with olive oil, not soap, because that's what Romans used to clean. Then you scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil, removing dirt, oil, and several layers of dignity. There are slaves to assist you if you're rich. If not, you do it yourself while trying to avoid eye contact with the senator next to you. Bathhouses are where deals are struck, gossip is traded, and diseases are casually spread. The water isn't drained between users. It's a warm, microbial soup of humanity, stirred hourly by the movement of hundreds of unwashed bodies. Skin infections, eye diseases, intestinal worms, everything is on the menu. And yet, this is one of the cleanest places in Rome. Outside the baths, personal hygiene is a gamble. You might wash your face daily and your feet often, but full-body bathing is more of a social event than a daily necessity. Perfumes and oils cover up most smells. Lice and fleas are common but tolerated. The concept of germ theory is centuries away, and nobody's counting bacteria when they're more worried about curses and crop failures. And remember that beautiful aqueduct system? It doesn't just supply water. It powers everything from grain mills to fountains to the flushing mechanisms in some elite toilets. But it's fragile. Earthquakes, floods, or simple disrepair can shut down entire sections of the city. When the aqueducts break, Rome doesn't just lose drinking water. It loses its public baths, its sewers, its fountains. Civilization, as the Romans know it, starts to unravel. Riots have broken out over water shortages. The emperor himself maintains a staff of aquarii, water engineers, just to keep the system running. And if they fail, you suffer. Because in ancient Rome, access to clean water isn't a luxury. It's your last line of defense against cholera, typhoid, and a dozen other slow, filthy deaths. By now, your mouth is dry, your skin is itchy, and you're beginning to understand that clean is a relative concept. But here's the twisted part. By ancient standards, Rome is doing pretty well. The city is cleaner than most medieval capitals. It has public sanitation, latrines, baths, and even street cleaners. But it's also the biggest city in the ancient world, and that density breeds disease. Waterborne illness is rampant. Even minor stomach bugs can spiral into fatal dehydration. And if you're poor, which you are, you can't afford a private system or a servant to boil your water. You drink what's available, and you pray, not to be purified, but to be spared. So the next time you fill a glass from the tap or flush a toilet with confidence, remember, in Rome, your survival depends on gravity, lead pipes, communal sponges, and the goodwill of an aqueduct built by a man who probably bribed his way through half the Senate. You don't control your water. You just hope it doesn't kill you. And on that hopeful note, it's time to think about lunch, if your stomach can handle it. If you've managed to survive the slop of a Roman street, dodge dysentery from a clay cup of aqueduct runoff, and work a full day in the choking heat of the Subura district without keeling over, you might think a bath would be the one mercy this city offers you. And to be fair, Rome is famous for its baths, but this isn't a hotel spa with cucumber water and lo-fi music. This is public bathing, Roman style, and for a plebeian like you, it's more about routine survival than luxury. Let's start with the setting. The Thermae, massive public bathhouses, funded by emperors and designed to show off imperial grandeur, are sprawling complexes of steam, stone, and social politics. Think gym, barbershop, and social media feed all rolled into one. There are over 800 bathhouses across Rome by the 4th century CE, ranging from small balnei tucked into neighborhoods to monumental structures like the Baths of Caracalla, which could host thousands of bathers a day. These places are architectural marvels, dome ceilings, mosaic floors, marble statues. But you're not here to appreciate the decor. You're here to clean yourself before your own body odor becomes a public health issue. Entry usually costs a quadrans, the smallest denomination of Roman currency, meaning it's technically accessible to almost everyone, even the poorest citizens. But just because you can afford to enter doesn't mean you belong. The hierarchy follows you through the door. Senators and equestrians recline in the hot pools and gossip in the tepidarium, while slaves like you scrub themselves with worn-out strigils in a corner, hoping no one important notices you tracking in street filth. The bathing process follows a predictable pattern. First, the apoditerium or changing room. There are no private lockers. If you don't have a slave to guard your tunic and sandals, someone might walk off with them. Clothes are often stolen here, especially from the lower classes, and the clothes watchers, mostly enslaved boys, are often in on the thefts. Lose your clothing, and you might be walking home barefoot, wrapped in shame and public laughter. Next is the palestra, The exercise yard. Yes, before bathing, Romans liked to work up a sweat. You'll see men wrestling, lifting weights made of stone, or flinging javelins across the field. Some even box Roman style, with metal-studded gloves called cestus. For the lower classes, this isn't just sport. It's a place to prove physical worth. But you're not here to make friends. You run a few laps, feign a squat or two, and head straight for the baths. Your muscles are too sore from hauling amphorae all morning. Inside the baths, you'll move from the cold frigidarium to the warm tepidarium, and finally to the blistering caldarium, where steam clings to the air and your skin. There's no soap. Instead, Romans coat themselves in olive oil, then scrape it off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil, taking dirt and sweat with it. If you're lucky, someone will help you, a friend, or more likely, another laborer just trying to speed things along. There's no privacy. You're naked among dozens of others, and the sounds of laughter, gossip, and grunts echo off the marble walls. This place is noisy, crowded, and hot. The air smells like a cocktail of oil, sweat, and mildew. Beneath the mosaic floors, fires rage in the hypocaust system, an ingenious heating network that uses raised floors and smoke tunnels to pump warmth into the caldarium. Slaves tend these fires all day, shoveling wood in suffocating rooms with no light and no fresh air. Some die from the heat, but their deaths make the marble hot to the touch, the cost of Roman cleanliness. The water is changed only occasionally, and filtration is a concept centuries away. You're bathing in a soup of skin cells, hair, oil, and whatever else floated off the last 100 bathers. People relieve themselves in corners. If someone bleeds during a rough shave or gets a nosebleed from the heat, that's just another addition to the communal brew. But in a city where fresh water is a gamble and soap is a luxury, this is the best you'll get. And this isn't just hygiene. It's civic ritual. Here, the bathhouse is where news spreads. Someone whispers that the emperor was spotted in disguise at the theater. Another boasts about his recent winnings at the Ludus. A freedman offers political bribes in the tepidarium, while a prostitute waits in the hallway outside, pretending to be a masseuse. For the poor, this is also a rare space where you're not fully excluded. Rich and poor alike sweat together. For a few minutes, you share the same steam as men who rule provinces. But there's a danger here, too. Bodies pressed together in humid air make perfect breeding grounds for illness. The plague of Cyprian, which will one day ravage the empire, spreads partly through bathhouses. Skin diseases, infections, lice, and fevers thrive here. The stone benches are often slick with something unidentifiable, and a misstep can send you slipping face first into a tile pool lined with strangers. If you're injured, tough luck. The medicus in the corner knows less about sanitation than a modern child. Once you've scraped yourself clean and suffered the caldarium, you move on to the final step, the massage and oil rub-down. Again, if you can afford it. Most plebeians skip this, but let's say today is payday, and you indulge. A low-ranking attendant slathers you in another round of olive oil, rubbing your limbs with rough hands and muttering in Greek or Aramaic. The oil stings the cracks on your skin, the cuts from the field, and the raw patch you got last week from walking barefoot. You smile through it. The pain is worth the brief illusion of luxury. Afterward, you dry off with a scrap of wool, linen is expensive, and return to your street clothes, now damp with sweat. You check the hooks in the apoditerium. Miraculously, your tunic is still there. You step outside, blinking against the sun. You're clean, sort of, but the streets are still thick with dust, dung, and the smell of salted fish. Within 5 minutes, you're sweating again. Dirt clings to your sandals. A child vomits near your foot. The bath was never meant to last. Bathing in ancient Rome is not about cleanliness the way we think of it today. It's about participation, about appearing civilized in a society obsessed with cultus, grooming, display, and public performance. To be dirty is to be low, invisible. But to walk out of the thermi, hair damp, oil glistening on your shoulders, is to momentarily rise above the grime of your station, even if you'll return tomorrow to the same bucket of water and reuse strigil. And if you think this is somehow indulgent, remember, For women, bathing was even more complicated. Separate hours or entire buildings were set aside. And while some enjoyed similar routines, many were kept at home, bathing with rainwater in cramped quarters. For enslaved women, bathing was sometimes done publicly, by force, under the scrutiny of leering men or cruel mistresses. For the wealthy, a balneum, a private bath inside their villa, ensured you never had to mix with the masses, heated by personal hypocaust, scented with imported oils from Arabia or Egypt, attended by silent slaves. But for the rest of Rome, the laborers, the couriers, the bakers, the sewer cleaners, the public bathhouse was a place of renewal, exhaustion, gossip, and risk. You went not to be healed, but to maintain the appearance of being human in a city that treats humanity like a fleeting luxury. The bath was not an escape. It was a pause from the heat, the stink, the fear, and the endless labor. It was a few minutes of semi-clean respite before stepping back into the furnace of Roman life. And with that fleeting relief, you head back out onto the cobbled road. Your feet still ache. Your skin is raw. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll do it all again. Let's talk about Roman food. Not the banquets of emperors reclining on silk cushions with figs dripping in honey and servants fanning them with peacock feathers. You are not an emperor. You're not even close. You are, in fact, a plebeian, a working-class Roman in a cramped insula, where breakfast is less about indulgence and more about surviving another day with enough calories to walk, work, and not collapse. So let's set the table. And by table, we mean whatever flat surface you can find that isn't covered in soot, bugs, or yesterday's crumbs. You eat with your hands because forks are still a few centuries from existing. Knives, sure, if you have one, but even then, it's mostly for cutting bread or defending your lunch from rats. Your daily diet, and let's be generous calling it that, is centered on one thing: grain. Specifically, a kind of wheat called far, spelt, and a lot of it. You eat it boiled into pulse, a porridge as bland as it sounds. Think of it as the ancient Roman version of oatmeal, only without sugar, milk, or any flavor at all. If you're lucky, it's salted. If you're really lucky, it has bits of onion or a drizzle of fish sauce, known as garum, to liven things up. That's right, fermented fish innards. It was the ketchup of the ancient world. It smelled like rot and seawater, and they poured it on everything. Bread, when you can get it, is dense, coarse, and made from stone ground flour that might contain trace amounts of actual stone. Dental care isn't exactly booming right now, so every bite is a gamble between hunger and chipping a tooth. But bread is sustenance. And if you're a laborer or dock worker, it's essential. Rome even instituted a grain dole, a nona, to distribute grain to the poor. Without it, many urban citizens would simply starve. If you're on the list, you get your rations. If not, well, you'd better hope you have a skill, a patron, or a very forgiving neighbor. As for vegetables, they're seasonal and mostly whatever grows nearby: cabbage, lentils, chickpeas, leeks, the basics. None of it is particularly glamorous, but it keeps scurvy at bay. You might stew them into something vaguely edible if you have olive oil or herbs, but again, you're not dining in the villa of a senator. You're working with what you can afford from the forum stalls or grow in cracked pots on the rooftop. And don't expect variety. You eat the same things over and over, day after day, until famine comes, and then you don't eat at all. Meat? That's not for people like you. It's expensive. When it does enter your life, it's likely from religious festivals, public feasts, or offcuts scavenged from butchers. More often than not, it's organ meat, boiled liver, intestines, trotters, lungs, the parts the wealthy don't want. You learn to chew fast and swallow faster. Spoilage is always a concern. There's no refrigeration, and what passes for fresh is heavily reliant on how tolerant your stomach is. If you live near the Tiber, the smell from the open-air markets might turn you vegetarian by necessity. Let's talk about the market, the Macellum. It's loud, chaotic, and covered in flies. Meat hangs from hooks, slabs of salted pork and strips of dried fish curl in the sun. Vendors shout, dogs bark, beggars loiter, and pickpockets glide through crowds like ghosts. You can buy fish, fruit, wine, beans, nuts, or eggs if you can afford them. Everything is haggled for, weighed on crooked scales, and bagged in baskets or cloths you bring yourself. Your coin pouch, tied tight beneath your tunic, thumps nervously with every transaction. One bad purchase, and you don't eat tomorrow. Water, like everything else, is complicated. Rome is famous for its aqueducts, but the water doesn't always make it to the poor. You might have access to a public fountain, where the water is cleanish, or you might be drawing from a well near the latrines, where it's not. To be safe, many Romans, including children, drink diluted wine. Not to get drunk, but because alcohol kills germs better than wishful thinking. A mix of water and cheap wine, called pasca, is the hydration of the masses. It tastes like vinegar and hope. Now, about those days when food runs out. Famine is never far. A bad harvest in Egypt, a delay in grain shipments, or a corrupt official skimming off the top, and the city's food supply collapses. Bread prices triple. Riots break out. People storm bakeries, loot warehouses, and sometimes lynch the bakers. The emperor is expected to intervene. If he doesn't, he risks becoming lunch himself, politically, if not literally. During famine, you survive on scraps, moldy crusts, spoiled olives, stale beans, weeds from the roadside. You might boil bark or grind acorns. Pets vanish. The rats get smart. The pigeons disappear. People eat things they shouldn't. And when the plague follows the famine, as it often does, hunger turns to disease. Starvation weakens the body, and Rome's many illnesses move in like uninvited guests. There's another layer to all this. Class. Because while you're trying to stretch a hunk of rye bread for 2 days, the elite are feasting. In the villas of the Palatine Hill, couches line banquet halls. Slaves serve platters of roasted dormice, honey-glazed songbirds, oysters, figs, and dates soaked in wine. They sip from silver goblets. They toss bones to the floor. They bathe between courses. For them, food is a performance. For you, it's a necessity that never stretches far enough. Even in death, food tells the truth. Wealthy Romans are buried with elaborate funerary feasts, their tombs adorned with carvings of banquets and gods pouring wine. The poor? Maybe a piece of bread at your grave, if your family can spare it. Maybe a final sip of pasca to send you off. In religious festivals, food becomes communal. Saturnalia, for instance, when masters serve slaves and everyone feasts together. But those days are rare and mostly symbolic. For the rest of the year, the lines are clear. Who eats well and who begs. Let's not forget storage and spoilage. You keep food in clay jars sealed with resin or in baskets hung from ceilings to deter rats. Preserving food means salting, smoking, drying, or steeping it in vinegar. Still, everything has a clock. Bread molds quickly in the Roman humidity. Olives go rancid. Meat turns in the sun. Every meal is a gamble. Every bite is a risk. Even the insects eat well. Grain is stored in granaries, which are dark, warm, and crawling with beetles and moths. If you're lucky, you get your ration before it's infested. If not, well, extra protein. Most people don't even pick them out anymore. They're too small to matter. Children grow up with hunger. They learn to wait their turn. They learn which vendors give better scraps, and which ones chase them away with sticks. Their bellies are often bloated from malnutrition. Their eyes dull. Parents do what they can. Sometimes it means stealing. Sometimes it means begging. And sometimes it means going without so the youngest can eat. Yet, through all of this, food is still culture. Even in scarcity, Romans cling to tradition. They bake religious cakes, prepare funeral meals, mark solstices with special dishes. They cook with pride, share what little they have, and pass down recipes, thin, watery ones, from mother to daughter, father to son. The tools are crude, the ingredients simple, but the effort is there. In graffiti on the walls of Pompeii, we find complaints about bad bread, insults to tavern keepers, even jokes about watery wine. Food was a common frustration, a common joy, a common reality. You might not eat well, but you ate Roman, and that meant something. So, as you sit down with your cracked bowl of pulse, crust of tough bread, and cup of lukewarm pasca, you're not just surviving. You're participating in the daily struggle, that defined the lower classes of the empire. You eat what you can, when you can, and pray for the annona to arrive on time. Because if it doesn't, your next meal might not come at all. And now that you're fed, it's time to go earn the next one. Because in ancient Rome, hunger is patient, but it always comes back. Religion in ancient Rome isn't something you do once a week. It's not a quiet, personal affair whispered in pews or practiced behind closed doors. In Rome, religion is everywhere all the time. It's baked into the bricks of the forum, painted on the walls of your insula, and written into the very schedule of your day. You don't choose to participate. You live inside it, and it watches you like the state because in many ways it is the state. You wake before dawn, and already the gods are in your thoughts. Before stepping outside, you mutter a quick offering to the household spirits, the Laras and Penates. These are the guardians of your hearth and pantry, the invisible figures that ensure your home doesn't fall apart. There's no food left to burn for them this morning, just a crumb of dried bread and a half-hearted gesture of thanks, but it's the thought that counts. Sort of. You know the stories. Neglect the household gods, and your family could suffer illness, injury, or general misfortune. It doesn't matter if you believe it. Enough bad luck strung together starts to feel like divine punishment, and soon you're scrubbing the floor and lighting incense to try to win back their favor. Outside, the street is already alive with sounds. Hawkers bark from market stalls, children dart between columns, and smoke rises in lazy curls from tiny shrines at the corners. These aren't just decorative. These are altars, small open-faced boxes holding flickering lamps, burnt offerings, and the thick scent of sacrificed animal fat. You pass them on your way to work. Maybe bow slightly, maybe don't. Someone always notices. Piety is social currency in Rome. Fail to observe the rites, and your neighbors won't just talk. They might accuse. The Roman pantheon is crowded. Jupiter rules the skies with thunder and ego. Juno watches over marriage, whether it's miserable or not. Mars is the god of war and masculinity, and Vesta keeps the sacred flame of Rome burning. A job so important that her priestesses, the Vestal Virgins, are chosen as children and punished by death if they break their vows. That's the world you live in, one where virginity, fire, and political stability are all bound in a single thread, and where the divine is never more than a few footsteps away. Religion isn't optional. It's calendarized. Over 100 official festival days a year, Lupercalia, where half-naked men chase women through the streets in the name of fertility. Saturnalia, where slaves and masters switch roles for a day in a wild, upside-down mockery of freedom. And then there are the Consualia, Vinalia, Robigalia, and more. Festivals to crops, harvests, rain, sun, and even mildew. Yes, mildew. Because in Rome, every natural force has a name, a temple, and a priest. You, as a poor plebeian or freedman, can't afford expensive sacrifices, but the elite can, and they make sure you know it. Wealthy patrons slaughter bulls at the temples, their robes splashed with blood, incense thick in the air, while you stand at the back, clutching your small votive figurine, hoping the gods can hear your prayer from that far away. The ritual language is often Old Latin, barely understandable even to those reciting it. But the spectacle, that's clear enough. Religion is theater. It always has been. Can you take part when you can? Maybe your guild hosts a minor ceremony. Maybe you help lead a procession through the street for a local deity. These rituals are public and communal, but also strategic. They reinforce your place in society, remind you of who rules, and give you a sense that, however lowly your station, you're at least part of something bigger. Of course, not everyone thinks alike. By the 1st century CE, the Roman world is already deeply diverse. Foreign cults have seeped into the cracks of the empire. You might hear whispers of a mysterious Eastern goddess named Isis, whose followers wear white and chant in candlelit rooms, or a strange sun god from Persia, Mithras, whose rites involve secret underground gatherings and symbolic meals of blood and bread. These religions are sometimes tolerated, sometimes outlawed, and always watched with suspicion. Romans value order above all. Anything that smells of disloyalty or secrecy is dangerous. That's why, when Christianity begins to spread, it doesn't just make the authorities nervous, it enrages them. A religion without sacrifices, a God without a face, a group that refuses to honor Jupiter or Caesar. That's not just impious. That's treasonous. But you, in this moment, probably don't think about Christianity. It's still a strange, foreign sect on the fringes of Roman cities. You've heard of them maybe, but your life is ruled by the gods of your ancestors, the expectations of your community, and the sheer momentum of tradition. Superstition is the second skin of daily life. You avoid walking under ladders, not because it's unsafe, but because it invites bad luck. A black dog seen at night? Omen of death. A sneeze? You immediately say salve, not out of politeness, but to protect the soul from